Come on. Hey, hey. Happy Thursday. What's up, everybody? Just walking the dog real quick. Come on, dog. Come on up here. I'm going a little early today because I have to be at the, I have a doctor's appointment at 1:30. What's happening? Oh, wow. A lot of people are jumping in and then just jumping right out again. Well, I'll tell you what, I got some good things to talk about. For those of you who are jumping in and out, you're going to miss this if you don't stay in. Got some interesting updates on Sean King, on Fiona Ryan, and on some other issues that I think will be interesting to people. Let me see if I can invite people to come on here. Okay. I don't know if that's for co-hosting. I don't want to do that. What's up? Going a little early today. Just so you know, I have to be somewhere at 2 o'clock, so I have to cut off around 1:40 Eastern time. That's when I'm starting a little early. So we can get in our good 2 hours of fun and games. By the way, this is the cool thing. Just so you know, if anybody's missed any of the key lives, I'm downloading and recording all of them and putting them up on my YouTube and Rumble channels. It takes forever because the download speed off of TikTok is slow, but the upload speed up to YouTube and Rumble, I mean, it takes forever. So it just takes time. So I'm in the midst of doing that. The one that had Fiona Ryan is on. It's an 8 hour and 15-minute live. It's like a ridiculous marathon we did on a Saturday. But that one has Fiona Ryan, and it has Quinn the Eskimo from checking in from Cairo, Egypt. And if you don't know who Quinn is a very well-known content creator on TikTok and Instagram. And he's the crazy guy who's got this big personality, bigger than life. And he went down to try to get into Gaza. And he's been in Egypt for like the last month, kind of waiting like everybody else to stage and go in. So he's basically trying to figure out like what are the best aid organizations to support. They've been loading trucks with non-perishables and just, getting a lay of the land and meeting people. That's what he's been up to. So, I'm sure he's enjoying it too. I mean, Egypt's a really beautiful place. Cairo's massive, right? And it's one of the oldest civilizations on the planet. Let's face it. We've all heard about the old pharaohs of Egypt, right? And of course, the pyramids, right? But I'm going to talk about some things around integrity today, which should be interesting because there's some stuff going on that isn't okay. Who am I to say, right? I'm like anybody else. I have my flaws, and I've done things in my past that that aren't great, that were not indicative of the things I try to do nowadays. But we all kind of grow up in certain ways like that, right? But there's a couple things going on. It's all about the current events, right? You can't change the past. You can't, feel regret about what you did when you were 20. I'm 56 now, and I'm certainly still not where I'd like to be, but I'd like to think I'm doing better than I was then, and hopefully you're all the same way. Uh, Someone couldn't hear me for a minute. By the way, I should do a mic check. Can everybody hear me? Because I was using my cellular, and because I'm out right now, obviously, and then it said poor signal, could not initiate live, so that's why I went to my Wi-Fi. But can everybody hear me? Can I get a mic check if you can hear me? Yeah, somebody says they can hear me. What happens is usually somebody has a bad connection or a bad audio. So here's my suggestion: if that's you, exit the live, exit TikTok, come back into TikTok, find me, and then come back on. That almost always fixes it. So yeah, well, I'm gonna let a few minutes go to kind of build up some people coming in. By the way, if you don't mind doing me a favor, I rarely ask this of the crowd, but usually other people do. But if you don't mind tapping on my forehead or whatever part of my mug you want to tap on, what it does is it spills out some likes, and then people generally start to come on the live more that way. And because we're going earlier than usual, people probably aren't going to be ready for it until about noon. And not that everybody schedules their day around me, let's face it, but for those who are used to coming in and like to. Somebody says ignorance is not acceptable. Listen, that's a great point. I did a video about that saying, lack of knowledge is no excuse for supporting, war crimes. But there are a lot of people that just don't know so much. And you got to remember, Israelis are kind of hardened people anyway. I met somebody who was Israeli like 30 years ago. They weren't very nice. And I'm sure there are nice people who are in Israel. I'm not trying to say that. But I'm saying that there's sort of a hardened edge. And almost like, the best way I can put it is, if you watch movies like Schindler's List, and you see the really hardened women who are like the SS guards, and they're just kind of mean and kind of don't have any smiles. That's the experience I got meeting Israeli women when I was in Hawaii. And I don't know, maybe that was just a one-off experience, but it seems like when I listen to the pro-Israel lives, there are a lot of women that are just have this really harsh, kind of negative, kind of arrogant, demeaning way about them that I really don't like. Somebody says, I am Palestinian, bring me up. If you don't know the formats of my lives, I am Palestinian, I'm happy to do that. I normally talk for anywhere between 15 or 20 minutes, sometimes longer, depending upon the day's issues, and then I bring guests on. So I'm happy to bring you up. You don't have to keep asking. I'm aware of your request. But I don't bring guests up right away unless I'm having a scheduled guest. Like last night, we had Professor Liam O'Mara. And if you don't know who Liam is, if you weren't there to see it, again, I'm recording these, so that'll be up. But as soon as I can get it there. But Liam O'Mara is an amazing scholar of history. He's got a PhD in world history and Middle East history, like a dual PhD, which is unbelievable. And man, you should hear this guy. He was talking about like 1937 Iraq and the politics of the region vis-a-vis Syria and the Kurds. I mean, this guy knows his shit, right? I don't know 90% of that stuff. I know the basics. Like I like to say, I can turn the TV on and I can sell a TV, but I sure don't know how to fix one or build one, right? Yeah, so I thought Dr. Liam O'Mara was awesome. I mean, I've been following Dr. Liam O'Mara's lives. He does them. He's a professor at a school in California somewhere. And he lives up on this remote mountainous area, so it takes him forever to get to where he works. He's just an interesting guy. He's a cat lover too, which I think that's cool because I love cats too. And just a nice person who has a good take on things. I think he cares, and he likes to teach people as well because he's a professor. But he made a comment last night. I asked him this because I was curious. I said, what is your experience in dealing with people from Gen Z or whomever you're dealing with, millennials or whatever? And he said, they're very aware because they have access to the internet. He said, but their writing skills are subpar. He said, not everybody, most are, because they're used to writing texts, right? They're not used to reading long form books, and they're used to sending texts, these little short, sort of shortcut writing. And there's something about reading a real paper book or newspapers, and then obviously writing periodically in a journal or whatever, where it just does something. There's some kind of mental connection from paper to paper or pen to paper. I can't exactly explain it, but for those of you who do it, you know what I'm talking about. So whenever I'm really having a hard time with something or whatever, I get out a piece of paper and I just start writing it down. I'm okay. How can I clarify what I'm thinking? Kind of slows you down a little bit, and you can only think as fast as you can write. And I can't. I can type way faster than I can write. So it forces you to slow down and reflect more. But anyway, so we have enough people in here now to get started. Yeah, I can talk about what's happening in Yemen with the Houthi rebels a little bit, but we'll get into that. Just remind me a bit. I'm going to cover another issue first. And whoever's, if you're holding still, let me see if they're still in the holding queue. Because, yeah, I am Palestinian. I'm not going to forget you, okay? So if you think, trust me, I will not forget you. I just want you to know that I'm not going to leave you hanging. So, and normally what I do, just let you know throughout the live, if I have more than one guest, I'll let you know the batting order so that you know if you want to wait or not. Because I've been in people's lives before and like I've requested to come up and you're just waiting and waiting and waiting. You're like, what the hell? So the guest, I mean, the host just keeps talking and talking like Jesus. So I like to interact with people. In fact, it saves me the breath of having to speak the whole time. So, okay, let's get started. So what I wanted to talk about today, just at the beginning, was first of all, the same stuff that's been going on for the last two months plus is still going on. Okay, I would say it's even worse though, because there are a lot of atrocities being committed as the Israeli military moves throughout portions of Gaza. And so you may have heard of some of them, but the ones we hear about is the tip of the iceberg. Those are the tip of the iceberg. There are many more that are happening, including what happens when somebody gets capital offense, like a capital offense gets capital punishment. The word is the person who actually pulls the switch is the exa. It rhymes with electrocution and the exa. You know what I'm saying? I just don't know if I can say that word or not. Well, that's going on in a lot of places where they're just taking people in the north. This is the reports of this, and they're just going into homes. And if you didn't leave, that's what happens. You go by the way of the bullet, unfortunately, or grenade or whatever it may be. So that's absolutely disgusting, and that's probably not going to get those crimes aren't going to be reported as much, just because there's no cameras, no internet up that way. But there are people that are by word of mouth reporting it. So that sucks. And I think the total amount of people that have been unalived so far, and by the way, there's going to be a day when we can say English instead of having to do all these workarounds, which is really silly. But there have been at least 21,000 people that have lost their lives so far in the conflict, probably more given some of the unaccountable people in the rubble and stuff like that. And many more who are sick and injured, right? Way more. and many who may succumb because of the lack of medical supplies and medical care, or some of the other issues like food and water. It's a disaster zone, and this should have ended. You know, it should have never started to this extent. They should have gone in and tried to get the H group to the extent they wanted to, which is understandable given what happened on the 7th. But this response, I mean, I knew it was going to be bad because most responses by Israel are about 10 to 12 times whatever happens to them. That's been the history of it. But it's been beyond anything that even I expected, and I've been watching this forever. So I wouldn't call it shocking, but it was surprising. But I'm never shocked by what the hardcore people who are quote unquote Zionists will do. They tend to be those who believe in it strongly and the mission that they espouse, they tend to be very cruel and indifferent and kind of just supremacists, quite frankly. Hey, Rosie. Um, anyway, I have my personal thoughts about it, about how I feel towards people that behave that way. Has nothing to do with the fact that they're Jewish. I could give a shit about that. It's just they happen to be Jewish in this case. And, I listened to a little segment by Scott Ritter this morning. He was talking about how any criticism of Israel has been conflated with anti-Semitism. We've talked about this a lot. And, he says it's just silliness. Everybody's so scared of being called that. He's like, listen, call me whatever the hell you want. I'm going to be critical of what the government's doing. And you can call me whatever names you want. You can play those silly games. I'm not playing those games. And that's how I feel. Okay, so let's talk about Sean King. Someone just says, when is Sean King going to be back? First of all, let me tell the audience, for those, there may be some people here who don't know who Sean King is. Probably not many. So go a little bit further back. So Sean King is someone who's been active as an activist in the American community for some time. So, for example, when the Black Lives Matters movement was taking place, which if you don't know what that was, there was a period of time after an individual by the name of George Floyd, who outside of a convenience store was put on the ground by police. Somebody named Derek Chauvin, a police officer, and others. But he's the one who physically put his knee on the back and neck area of George Floyd, kind of holding him down. And it was like 8 or 9 minutes straight where the guy was saying he couldn't breathe. Now, some people argue because he was on substances, which he was. They later found when they did his autopsy, he was on several, like an opiate and some other stuff. I mean, my point is, who cares? I mean, whether you strangle somebody or suffocate them, whether they're on a drug or not, even if the drug contributes to it, you still shouldn't have been suffocating the person, right? So I think that's a bit of a cop out. But anyway, so the officer was found guilty. But after this happened, because there's been so many unaliving of African Americans in our country at the hands of police. And by the way, those are the ones that get coverage. There are many other incidents. I could spend a whole day just talking about how the criminal justice system works and how police functions. It's not great. America has a lot of problems in that area. But in this case, it was like the straw that broke the camel's back. And so there was a huge outpouring of just, outrage and protests / riots, places being burned down, all sorts of craziness happening in a number of cities, which is normal, right? It happens. It's happened in my city before when certain people have been unalived. So because of that whole thing, the officer Derek Chauvin went to jail. Sean King, that's why I bring this up. Sean King sort of came into large focus by advocating on behalf of these issues at like the right time, right place. And his Instagram account and his social media presence kind of exploded. So that's what I know. Maybe there's other stuff that he did before that. I'm just giving you what I've heard so far. So he's got a big following. He had a big following, I think about 3 million people, or maybe it's more, on Instagram. So he's been someone who's quote unquote advocating for the oppressed, right? Now, there's a lot of conjecture that people bring up about his identity and how honest he is about his identity and background. His birth certificate says one thing. He claims he's a different, ethnicity or whatever. I could give a shit about that, really. The biggest thing that's an issue is he's had issues around raising money. This is the big, sort of. Now, put it this way. I've already had this interaction with someone named Fiona Ryan. So my goal in any of these conversations is not to dig on somebody who's advocating for a group of people that I think need as many advocates as they can get. So just don't mistake me for what my motives are here. But you know how I am. I got to look at the whole picture, right? So I do believe there can be an and when it comes to people. They may be doing great advocacy work, and not but, because I don't think it takes away from the work he's done. But there's some allegations that I think are worth discussing. Okay, so let's talk about it for a second. What are people alleging? I don't have any receipts for this. I'm just going to tell you that, other than the videos I've seen and what people have alleged. But he's done various things to raise money around these issues that I've just talked about. So He's probably raised a lot of money. I do not know how much has gone to whom, when, where, and how. But the allegation is that Sean has either advertised to sell some products to raise money. Like one of the examples I had was he had advertised these hoodies that were like special BLM hoodies that were made by families that had black-owned businesses, and the fabric was gotten from places who produced the fabric that were black-owned. I mean, basically, it was something that was supportive of black people throughout the supply chain and also promoting the Black Lives Matters movement. That was the picture that was painted around the product. Now, I think some of that wasn't true. You know, like anything else in life, it's hard to get stuff from different sources nowadays that aren't corporate owned or whatever, right? So that's the way the world is and everywhere. And on top of that, people pre-ordered these hoodies for $160 a piece. That's a lot for a hooded sweatshirt, right? That's more than usual. So, and then people say that they paid for these things and they never got them delivered. So that's a little suspect, right? And I think Sean claimed publicly after a while that the business failed. Okay, take that for what it is. Okay, so maybe that's the case. I don't know how it worked out. I mean, I have an MBA in finance. I'd be happy to go through and forensically look at his books, but I doubt there are any. So there's that. And then there are other accusations. He's raised, I think, somewhere between $6 and $7 million over the course of doing his work. I don't know how somebody came up with that number, but that's what they've reported. And so a lot of people have alleged that not a good portion of that money has not made it to most of the causes for which it was, advertised to the public. And that he may, allegedly, again, I don't have any proof of any of this, but there's been enough people reporting it that I think it's not just people trying to delegitimize the guy. These are people that have no reason to harm him, because a lot of people alleging this are black people. And those are the causes that he's been supporting primarily. So the main sentiment is, and where there's smoke, there's usually fire. He bought an $850,000 house in New Jersey. Do with that what you want. That's a pretty expensive place to live, right? And he bought a $40,000 dog. He paid $40,000 for a dog, claiming that because people had been hassling him for X, Y, and Z, I don't even know, that he needed this dog to protect himself. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't have $900,000 sitting around to enrich my personal lifestyle, nor do I want to do that. That's my personal choice. But if I was advocating for other people, and then somehow, I don't know how else he gets his money, but if I were to get my money from fundraising and then not tell people the details of that and then buy these expensive things, I don't know. I think that's worthy of a conversation, right? The way that I talk about it is, I've been very open about my lifestyle, right? I spend $2,600 a month on my entire living expenses. That's not much for someone who's 56 in America, especially with prices going up. So it's real simple for me. Everybody gets to choose how they live, right? I don't have the right or wrong way to do it. That's just how I do it. We're talking about Sean King. Sean King is the person that just got taken down from Instagram supposedly because of his pro-Palestinian content. So, and that's quite possible, by the way. I'm pretty sure that's what's happening. So there's a lot of conjecture about that. Of course, people are angry about censorship and stuff like that. So we're talking about that issue. We're also bringing up the fact that there are some allegations that in Sean's past, he's done some very suspect things regarding fundraising, and people have questioned where the money goes. So some people call him a grifter. Some people call him, he's like a crisis hunter. I don't know what's in Sean's heart. I've never met Sean. I know that Quinn met him at the Doha Forum and felt that he was a nice person when he met him. And like I said, it can be some people can have a really good heart and that do care for other people, but then for whatever reason they may have a weakness where they just don't know how to parse right from wrong, and they maybe do some things that are, not in keeping with what would be ideal to take money from the public. So my point is this: one of the missions that Quinn is doing while he's down in Egypt is to figure out which of these aid organizations are legit, so that nothing like that would happen, nothing suspect, and then the money goes to the people who need it rather than to some other place. So in this case, not to beat a dead horse, I don't have receipts, I don't have any details, but I've seen a lot of allegations, just like what happened with Fiona Ryan. Right? Somebody mentioned to me when I first did the video about Fiona Ryan. If you don't know who she is, she's a woman from the UK, also advocating on behalf of Palestinians. Good stuff. But then I got bombarded. She got arrested by the UK government for what they called the T word, and then plus malicious communications. And they have different laws in the UK regarding speech. So she got arrested. So I did a video on her arrest, which is all I knew at the time. And then, of course, I got bombarded with people saying, "Why are you discussing her? She's a anti-Semite. She doesn't like trans people. She's against, whatever. I got bombarded. I'm like, oh shit. So then I had to do some homework, and I did some homework and saw, some of the stuff that she said was questionable. Now, everybody has the right to say whatever the hell they want. I support Fiona's right, and anybody else is to do whatever the hell they want. I really can give a shit. But I don't want to be advocating and saying someone's a good person or whatever if they're doing stuff like that. Because it's fair to be critical of the Israeli government, but I think if we're being mean towards Jewish people, if anybody's doing that, that detracts from the argument because I don't think most people who are pro-Palestinian have a problem with Jewish people. They don't care. It's about Zionism, right? That's a big point of differentiation. I don't think Fiona was doing a good job, in my opinion, of making that differentiation if she was even trying to in the first place. And her point of thing was she said the word Semite, which is probably accurate, means people of Semitic heritage from the region of historic Palestine, right? I agree that's the case. But the community of Judaism and Jewish people have taken that word over to mean anti-Jewish. Let's face it, that's what 99% of people perceive it to be. And her point is she has every right to, you know, to not be called an anti-Semite because Semite means something else to her by definition. I'm like, that's not the point. The point is public perception. She's like, well, I don't care what the public thinks. I'll say what I want, and who gives a shit? I'm like, okay, well, you do you, but I'm not going to be going with that plan because that's unnecessarily, I'm not about, she said I was too much about identity politics. Maybe so. But I like to think if you don't have to piss somebody off for no reason, why do it, right? You want to build allies, not enemies. So that's her style. I have my style, and she has a right to have her style. Anyway, so the point is with Fiona, same thing. She's been fundraising a lot of times around this issue. One time was to raise money for she and her family of three and her husband to go down to Cairo, Egypt, and kind of quote check things out and just kind of like Quinn has done. But Quinn didn't raise money for you to pay for Quinn's trip. So Fiona has a number, like 10 or 12 different fundraisers over the time. Again, a lot of people have alleged, I don't have the details, that she's taken the money and done personal things with it and not used it for the causes that she raised it under. So the same kind of thing about Sean. So when it comes to integrity, again, I'm not some prince or perfect person at all. Trust me. But I am straightforward and I try to be, as much as I can in my life. And, we always fall short of the mark. But I'm very open and transparent about, where I am with my situation so that if I ever do have to spend money that comes in on stuff, you already know it. And somebody says, what does Egypt have to do with this? Nobody can get into Gaza right now. So those who want to get into Gaza, who are trying to help the Palestinian people in Gaza, are most of them are in Egypt. And Egypt plays a big role in this. I mean, the Al-Sisi government, if you don't know who that is, that's the current ruling government. They're backed by the military. And that's how they came to power. And they're not they're not being very conducive to helping the Palestinians right now. There's a lot of conjecture. Most Egyptian people desperately want to help Palestinians because they see them as their brothers. I'll address Sean King being back, quote unquote, in a second because he's been taken down off Instagram. So the people of Egypt really want to do so. The problem is you can't protest in Egypt. You get arrested or put in jail for quite some time. It's just a very strict environment. So those who are down there are trying to get the lay of the land, and they're staging in Cairo, Egypt, which is the capital of Egypt. If and when they get a chance to open up the different crossings, they would have to go across the Sinai, which is about a 5.5-hour drive, and get to the Rafah border crossing, which is the border crossing between Gaza and Egypt, and then go in and help out with the other aid organizations. That's the goal, but there's no date or time when that's going to happen. So that's what's going on there. Now, as far as Sean King's account got taken down off of Instagram. He's a big influencer. He has like 3.5 million followers or something. It's a large thing. And again, remember, I've talked about this before. I have 100,000 followers or so, right? That's a small fish. You got 3 million, 5 million, 10 million. That's a big fish. So as soon as you get a big audience, what you say matters to the establishment. Well, Sean was being very direct with his posts, putting up a lot of stuff that was graphic and very, very unflattering to the Israelis. So my guess is, like other people too, who get pressured, even guys like me sometimes, there was somebody pressuring Instagram, which is Facebook, Meta, to take that stuff down or limit the reach. So that's what happened. They gave warnings, community guideline violations or whatever they call it. Same thing as what's happened to me. And then they eventually just take you down. And that's what happened to Sean. So, like I said, it's an and thing. So for those who don't think, I have no reason, I don't know Sean. I have no idea what's in his heart. I don't know much about his specific background, his living circumstances, his kids, wife, all that stuff. I don't know. But I do think it's a little suspicious that he's raised money for these little causes and then goes out and buys himself a close to $1 million home and a $40,000 dog, right? I don't know. That's my point. Anyway, so if and when I decide to try to help fundraise for the aid groups, which I don't have a clear picture yet of who the good ones are, I certainly don't want to raise money and then direct it to, certainly not myself, but to groups that aren't going to help the people. That's what I'm waiting to find out, and I'll probably do some kind of a GoFundMe or whatever the tools are going to be. But what I'm going to do is this, and what I'm doing with my personal site as well. Okay, I think it's important to be transparent. So every dollar that comes into me, I've asked people to donate to me because I'm working without any kind of support right now, and I don't have an income. So at some point your savings run out, right? But I'm going to keep something on my website, which is chipbarnesonline.com, and it's going to say fundraising and expenditures. And every month, I'm going to show you what came in from exactly what source. So if it comes in from TikTok or it comes in from Cash App, whatever the sources are that are on my link tree, that little link in my bio that you can click on, it'll be listed. There'll be a little spreadsheet that says revenues, which is the money that comes in, and then expenses. And I've told people that I have $2,600 a month in expenses. That's probably going to go up as inflation hits, right? So let's just say $3,000 a month. I got to make that to survive, right? Otherwise I'll be outside cardboard sign or doing work for Uber or whatever the hell. And I don't mind doing that, but I just would rather do this. And then you'll see exactly where the money went. If we hire somebody to help out with the social media, you'll see that. If we want to grow the business and maybe part-time, whatever, you'll see it. So that's what I would like to see. If somebody, listen, I hate giving money to an organization. You don't know if it went into a black hole. You don't know if it got spent on the executive side. You don't know. This way you'll know down to the penny, right? That's fine. So hope people appreciate that. That's important to me so people don't feel they're getting taken advantage of. All right. So basically what I'm talking in general, what I'm trying to talk about is integrity. And there's a lot of that lacking in society nowadays, right? And we need good people who care about issues outside of themselves, who want to build community-based systems that are going to hopefully eventually turn the tide of some of these things that have gotten way out of whack. Yeah, and listen, not everybody's going to agree with this. The approach that I want to take, or I think makes the most sense. I got told yesterday on somebody's live, I'm not kidding you, that I was an effing moron and to shut the F up. And then he muted me. And his idea was just, and I think this person had the right end goal in mind, is to change the system. But his idea was we have to do it through unionizing, like just going through the union process. So I can get into that. But anyway, I disagree. And that's where I don't think unionizing is bad. But I do think that only unionizing is not going to be the path in and of itself to make these things change, because it's going to take forever. Corporations resist unionizing quite a bit, if you haven't noticed, up into including threatening to shut down the store or the business or that segment of their business to avoid it. So it's just going to be an uphill battle. It's hard to even get people to agree to be a part of the union at the working level, because I know somebody who does this for a living, and it's hard to convince people to go to the union. So that's just going to be tough, and it's not going to have enough timely impact. Anyway, somebody wanted to come up. I told them I'd bring them up, so I don't want to make them wait any longer. Thanks for being patient. I am Palestinian, and then Sim. And then somebody asked about when Sean's coming back up. I don't know the answer to that, because that's up to Meta or Facebook or Instagram. I'm sure he's appealed, but their decision may be final. Sean's going to probably put out TikTok videos or whatever to let people know. So we'll see. Okay, I am Palestinian. Second guest will come up as well.
Hey, Chip, how are you?
Good. How's it going?
Good. So I was so passionate about asking a lot of questions. Now I heard so much information. Now I'm like, oh my gosh, that's, all the stuff in my mind is all gone. But anyways,
Okay.
so I'm an American. I have, my kids are born here, and you're an American too. How can we get our country back? You know that what's going on with Zionists being infiltrated in our government, federal government, everything. We also know the tie between them and Israel. And I think it's hard for us to go there and ask Israel not to do what they're doing. I think if you cut the funding, then there will be some impact, right? What can we do, Chip? Because you believe in your constitution. We believe in our constitution. We believe this country that it's a fair country and everything else within it, right?
Yeah.
So this is not okay, because the America that originally was built in our Constitution, freedom, it's no longer, right? How do you
Yeah.
feel about that? How do you feel about that? That's all I'm trying to ask you.
The way I personally feel about it is I'm saddened by it, and I'm outraged by it, and I am discouraged by it in terms of the difficulty it's going to be to try to change it. And just to be fair, I say this sometimes, and this is something that I think the public has to be willing to accept. It may be such a strong stranglehold that that stranglehold will not be broken. It's possible. It's probably a good possibility. And that's a very discouraging thing to have to acknowledge.
How can
But
you accept that, Chip?
I didn't say I accept it. I'm just saying the fact that, I think that it's a reality we have to consider, put it that way. And here's the thing. This is why I say that. Let me explain why. Okay. The amount of control systems that have been acquired and built into the system over the last 5 or 6 decades are very substantial ones. So I'll just name a few. So over the years, corporations have gained what's called personhood. So they have standing in court like you and I do from a legal standpoint. As far as money is concerned, money is now considered free speech, First Amendment protected free speech under Citizens United, which was a Supreme Court ruling. There's only two ways to you have to overcome those two decisions with what's called a constitutional amendment. We have the First Amendment, the Bill of Rights, the first 10, and we have 20, 25, 25 15 others, 16 others. So we have 26 total amendments. So we'd have to get another amendment. There's two paths to getting an amendment done. There's one through Congress, and there's one through the state houses. So the way it would work is you have to get a 2/3 majority of Congress signed by the president, or you have to get 3/4 of the state houses. Initially, 2/3 have to agree to ratify the amendment, and then 3/4 have to vote to ratify the amendment. Now, if you look at the influence of the political structure, the corporations, the interest groups, etc., they have a stranglehold on both of those processes. So it leads one to believe, simply, that while they still have that stranglehold, none of these avenues through the traditional system are going to be pursuable, right? They're going to die on the vine as they move through those two pathways. So for those two reasons alone, I believe that's why things are going to be very difficult. So that leaves us with other pathways, right? So there's three tools that the citizenry has, just like when a union organizes to overcome some sort of corporate problem. They have some demands, right? They want better pay or maybe better working hours or better vacation or whatever it is, pension, those demands. And those demands are set by the union, and they try to do them in a prioritized way. So they can't ask for 75 things, right? It's just too much. But they agree on maybe the top two or three that are most important to the union members. They vote on that, and then that's their demands. They then first try to negotiate that, without going on strike. That's like a lower level step in the process. And then if they need to, they escalate the tactics up to and including a lengthy strike to try to break the corporate, stranglehold. That same process that I just described to you is what needs to occur, but just instead of the corporation, put the power structure that controls these various factors and that's blocking the system serving the public versus serving the wealthy and the national
But
security establishment.
but Chip, if I may jump in between, so
Yep,
the current situation, in terms of economy and financial issues in America, we
yep,
have 70% of people living paycheck to paycheck. So
yep,
these people, for the past decades, like how you mentioned, 5 decades or 6 decades. So they've been planning this properly. So a usual or regular American would
yep,
not be able to even look up, let alone being able to do anything.
yep,
So how is that possible that we all can say, "Hey, today none of us going to work"? How are we
yep.
going to be able to pay anything?
So those are great points. So let me answer those 2 points. First of all, remember, this is going to be like trying to climb Mount Everest 3 times in the same day with no oxygen. I'm just telling you, that's how hard it's going to be. Now, it's not impossible, but it's going to take an amazing amount of work and effort and some magic to happen at the same time and some luck. Let's face it. So let's address those 2 points you just raised. So first of all, there's two other obstacles I didn't mention. You mentioned one of them, which is the lack of resources that the average person has. Most people, like you said, are living paycheck to paycheck. They can't afford a $400 emergency. They don't have anything saved up. So they're just in crippling debt. They're going on to credit cards. They're paying the high interest rates to the banks. It's a disaster. And over time, more and more people are being squeezed into that category by virtue of inflation and the predatory systems that cycle money from the local economies up to Wall Street. We've seen that happen for decades. Now, what's the other one? They've very successfully used the media industrial process. They've consolidated the ownership to 5 or 6 companies, and they have a very consistent methodology of dividing the public by left and right issues, social issues, abortion, gun rights, wokeism, whatever, you fill in the blank. So they've got people bickering. I watch 5 or 6 lives every day that I go through TikTok, and all it is somebody claiming their side's the right side, and these, the Republicans are evil and Trump's the worst guy in the world. Then you got people who are going to vote for Trump saying that Democrats are morons and look what Biden's doing. And meanwhile, the rich people are laughing to the bank. They're looking at these people bickering at the lower levels going, we kind of have these people right where we want them. Not only are they poor, but they're also fighting with each other. So it's a very difficult system to break through. So here's how it works. When you're in a union, there's two things they do to get over these two obstacles that I just mentioned. So let's talk about the money first. So when the union takes dues throughout the year. So once people agree to be in the union, you get a certain amount of money deducted from your paycheck every 2 weeks, and that goes to the union fund. Similarly, those who are going to participate in a large, it's called a movement, general strike slash, what it's going to call protest, or we're going to call it, that'll slow things down and force the ruling class to make concessions. There has to be a way to provide that subsidy, that floor, that safety net for people who can't afford not to work. You just mentioned that. So that's one part. That's called mutual aid. And that money has to be raised in each community to help the people participate. So that's a tough thing to do in and of itself. But on top of that, then you have to get, people have to be willing to go on strike, right? They have to be willing to take that time off of work, risk their safety, risk their future, risk their freedom. That's asking a lot of somebody, right? And so somebody very aptly mentioned last night, what would cause somebody to do that? What would cause somebody to make that decision, to take those risks and to bring on that hardship to their families? Toughest things are, try going without your income on top of what you're struggling with. It sucks. So that mutual aid is important, but most people are going to be afraid to do that. So their circumstances will have to get worse before they get better for them to finally make the shift and say, okay, all bets are off now. I got to do something different. So it keeps people from taking action, and that's normal. Doesn't make them bad people. It just means, and a lot of people, by the way, don't even know this stuff. They don't even know what they don't even know. But there are three tools that the public has that the wealthy doesn't, and that all those people in government that are the permanent establishment, and that is the sheer numbers of us people, our purchasing power, and our labor. And those are three things the system requires for it to function. We don't buy anything. But it's hard to get a lot of people. It has to be done at critical mass to have a big enough impact for the concessions to be considered. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Chip, I'm gonna make it short. I don't know, man. It feels like this road it's gonna be very long, and who knows that you think that this is what we're gonna do. This is gonna be outcome, and that can already when they know that we are doing that, so they're gonna change the system.
Of
So
course.
down the road, in 5, 6, 1, 2, 3 years, it will go back to how they want it, and you think that you accomplishment, but in reality,
Yeah.
nothing. And call me paranoid, but I think when we're talking here, they're listening too.
Yeah,
So
of course.
it's not because their ears are all blocked and they don't know. They collect data, they collect opinion, and they understand how to maneuver the system and do whatever they want to do. So
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, and think of it this way: they're very smart people that run these systems, right? They're not dumb, and so they're thinking ahead like two moves down the chessboard, like we are, or at least those of us who are paying attention. And if you're somebody that thought there might be more people rising up, like let's say they're going to be angry from being marginalized economically, with technology, automation, AI coming to bear, a lot more jobs are going to be lost. A lot more jobs are still going to be outsourced outside the country, which has been the pattern for decades. So there's going to be less people in the workforce able to earn income. And so therefore they're going to get pissed. I mean, most people get pissed when they're, hold on one sec. Train, just go ahead.
you got your shock
What?
for today.
There was a fire truck going by.
I know.
Yeah, so listen, I don't mean to bum anybody out, but I'm letting you know that those in power have done an amazingly effective job at consolidating power. And here's what I think is going to happen, which is, you made a very good point. Even if the people were to take these steps, which we're saying are going to be challenging, the people in charge are going to put more obstacles in the way and are going to try to create control systems to avoid the likelihood of these things taking their course anyway. And so I've done videos about that before, what I think they're going to be, most of which I've studied from others who have been looking at this. So yeah, it's a tough slog. I chose not to have kids when I was in my early 20s because I saw the writing on this wall a long time ago, and it's come to bear exactly the way I feared, and then some. So
All
anyway,
right,
for those who do have kids and want a better future, we're on the downslope of empire now, and we're on the wrong side of a fragmenting global economy. So things aren't going to get better for the average person unless they do something much differently.
yeah, and I have 2 kids, and I want them to be independent in terms of financial, but I don't want them to pay 30 years of mortgage We can't, I mean, that's not life, Chip. That's not life. So, and
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, interest in usury is a big part of American society. Obviously, finance is a big part of our economy. So, yeah, that's why it's haram in different societies and Muslim societies where you can't charge interest because it breaks the backs of people, right?
correct. And then it's just systematic slavery. I mean, I know it's not based on your color of your skin, but now you have, systematic
Yeah,
slavery. That's it.
exactly.
All right, Chip, keep up the good work, man.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
You too.
Take care. Yeah, big points to bring up, right? These are big issues, and I think that everyone will be impacted by them. Let me give you just a couple things that, listen, I don't have any guarantee these things are going to come to bear. I've gotten shut off the lives before for saying this stuff. So I'm trying to say that other people say this and they still take it down. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to wait to say those things on another platform because I don't want the live to get taken down. But there are others who fear that many of these control systems are coming. I tend to agree because why wouldn't they? And we'll see. Okay. We have a couple more people in the queue. I'd like to bring them up. We have Sim Sim and then Alliance Callus. Alliance Callus. Okay, I'm going to bring up Sim Sim. And for those of you being upset by all this, I apologize for that. I'm not trying to upset you.
Hi, Assalamu alaikum, Chip. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good. Thanks for asking. Chip, I'm in the West Bank and everything. I live in Palestine. You guys were talking about the strike, as I heard, right?
Well, the
About the
idea is that if we can have a nationwide strike with other protests and not spending money on most of the products other than necessities, that might be something that would cause the balance of power to shift.
yeah. Doing a strike, it'll affect, but it's a risk for people. Not everyone would take that step and risk their jobs and their lives for that, because not
I agree.
everyone has a stable income, and it's really hard for people to take that or to encourage themselves to do a strike. Um,
Did you?
so
Did you? Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. So, did you hear this thing we talked about mutual aid or the union fund? Did you hear that conversation?
yeah, I did hear that
Okay.
conversation.
So that
And
would cover that issue. There'd be enough money to carry people's basic expenses until the process unwound. So I know people would be fearful, but that fear would be overcome by saying, "Hey, we'll take care of you while this goes on."
yeah, but even the strike, even though it's a risk that people have to take in the US and in Canada and the UK and all those kinds of countries, but
Yeah,
I think maybe that's the way to somehow hurt them in their pocket or show them that there are people standing with Palestine, and that will maybe scare them that the population is increasing and the people that are standing with Palestine are a lot of people. And something else you also mentioned about Sean. I was shocked by that information that Sean was maybe that's true about him. Like I honestly don't know what to say about that.
yeah,
It's
it's kind of
shocking.
heart wrenching because he's got a lot of adulation for being like a big advocate, and he has a huge audience, right? So I think it can be, and like I was saying earlier, he's done a lot of good in raising awareness for people because he's got a huge platform, but it's very disconcerting to hear that somebody would take advantage of that for personal gain.
I don't know, honestly. The thing is, Chip, honestly, that pisses me off a lot is that people are literally taking advantage of the situation and our people's pain in Gaza and taking advantage of all these kinds of things. I can tell you that me myself, I don't trust these GoFundMe or these cash or these donations that are going into Gaza, because you never know, or you never have like a trustworthy source that where your money is going for these
Yeah,
donations.
yeah.
And it's really disgusting to me that people are taking advantage of this whole situation just for money and just for their own greeds and needs. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Something else I wanted to mention,
Well,
Chip.
let me share one thing before you finish your thought. Just so you know,
Yeah.
there is a glimmer of hope. Quinn the Eskimo, one of his major purposes from being down in Cairo, hoping to get into Gaza, is to assess that landscape for the community here on TikTok and elsewhere, so that if we do make donations, they do get to the people of Gaza. I trust Quinn. I don't think he's going to try to skim or try to take advantage of people. So hopefully, once he determines some of those groups, we'll be able to make donations and not feel so concerned as you just mentioned. So please continue.
Yeah, of course. These are the kind of people that we trust, and we're seeing where the money is going. Not a person that comes up on his platform or her platform and is saying, "Oh, donate to me, I'll send that money." It's up. Okay, where's your source? Can you show me where the money is going directly, if that money is reaching to you and all these donations? And something else I wanted to ask is, did you hear the latest news about what's happening in the West Bank in general?
Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah, yeah. They're going crazy on the West Bank. They took yesterday more than $1 million from the ATMs and the money
Yeah,
transfers, the money that where they transfer money and currencies.
yeah,
It's really crazy, honestly. And they've been airstriking the West Bank. They've been raiding the cities. It's going more crazy, And now because all the eyes are on Gaza, no one's looking on the
yeah,
West Bank or on East Jerusalem. So now it's like they're taking advantage of the whole situation.
yeah,
2023, even before everything started, 2023 has literally been the deadliest years for Palestinians in the West Bank in specific.
yeah,
Yeah, so honestly, yeah, it's crazy. The raiding, the invasion that's happening with the vehicles, with the DN, with the Panther vehicles with 12 to 18 soldiers in each one, the unaliving, they unalived 6 people at once, where their ages were between 16 to 20 in one of the cities called Tulkarem.
yeah,
Two were unalive today too because they were in a critical condition and they've had an injury because of it. They're destroying the infrastructures of the streets in all of the West Bank, in
yeah,
especially refugee camps, and they're taking advantage of that situation. They're cutting off the electricity and water in the refugee camps when they come and invade. They're arresting yesterday. They literally arrested more than 200 men in the same night. 200 men with no
yeah.
valid reason, with no, and and at the end of the day, you're sitting in your house and you're like, how can they get away with that? There's no government, there's no organization, there's no people to have confidence or everything that they're doing, and
Yeah.
it's crazy, honestly.
Yeah, they've been doing it on a smaller scale for many, many years, as you all know from knowing the region and the people. But they just ramped it up. I think it's like on steroids now. They've ramped it up to such an extreme level and pace that it's unprecedented in the history of the conflict. And it's tragic. I always say things just keep getting worse for Palestinians. Their plight just gets deeper and deeper and more sad by the day and by the month and by the year. And they're the most marginalized people consistently in my lifetime. So it just really saddens me, and the fact that there isn't the political will and courage to come in and stop the process because of all the other considerations. The big obstacle is my country, the United States. Let's face it. Let's be honest.
Yeah, of course,
And that's
yeah.
and it goes back to the same thing we were talking about earlier. The same problems that block this issue are the same problems that block every other part of these other issues. It's the same power dynamic. This one is driven a lot by groups that have an Israeli interest in mind, like APEC and others. But you remember, there's a large presence of people in our business community who are pro-Zionist, who happen to be
Yes.
Jewish, and that's just the way it is. So when people have money and power, they have influence, and then there's I've seen videos of people threatening the Biden administration that if they don't change the discourse at college campuses, they're not going to give him any money for his election coming up. So that's what they do. They use carrots and sticks to force politicians to do their bidding. And it's all the same cycle. And that's what has to happen. That cycle has to get broken. The mud pit into which people come from all walks of life to try to change this, they get stuck in quicksand. And that's the problem. It just doesn't facilitate helping the people and doing the right thing.
Yeah, it's a corrupted government at the end of the day. They're not doing anything to benefiting their own people. They call America this free land when everyone has their free rights, but at the end of the
Yeah.
day, when you really look at it, it's only for their benefits and their own selfishness. It's all about the greed, it's all about the power, it's all about the money. It's like even
Yeah.
all the Arab countries that they're controlling, it's like blackmailing, for example, like the oil for the resources. It's all these where they just want to have the power, where they want to control. And it's such a corrupted government. I honestly wish that maybe there's a way for this government.
Hopefully she comes back. Are you back?
Yeah, I got a phone call.
There we go.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
so I really wish, at the end of the day, that this corrupted government, it's really disgusting. It's like, it's not even that Gaza is against Israel at this point. It's like Gaza is against America itself because they're the one holding the power. They're the one controlling everything. They're the one
Yeah.
supporting Israel with all their weaponry. Like when you see Israel, they have nothing. They have no resources. They have nothing. It's all coming from countries outside that are supporting them, and it's really disgusting, honestly. I really wish there was a solution for all of this and for all the politicians and all these people to go, but what are we gonna do at the end of the day? It's them controlling us. It's
Yeah.
them having
It's
the
really
high
tough.
power. Yeah, it's them having
Well,
the high power.
Thank you for sharing your point of view. I appreciate you
Oh,
coming
you're
on.
welcome. Thank you. Thank you,
Have,
Chip.
have a nice rest of your day. Yeah, sure, sure thing. So somebody had been asking, listen, some people come in and out of these lives. So let me just reiterate one of the points we raised earlier in the live. And by the way, I want to just acknowledge the next guest is going to be Alliance C. Callis and then Epi Revolution. So something has been discussed about Sean King. I'm not an expert on it, so don't take my word for it, but you can go to Google or YouTube, whatever, type in Sean King questionable fundraising or something like that. I Googled it or YouTubed it, something like that. But there are people who have made many videos about this going back a long time, way before Israel Palestine. And the allegations are that while Sean has done a good job advocating for certain social causes, as well as the one we're currently watching, obviously his Instagram account, if you don't know, just got taken down yesterday or day before. And he had like 3.1 million followers or something, a huge following. And he had been posting a lot of the direct imagery that was coming from Gaza. And I believe that's what got him eventually in trouble, I'm guessing. A lot of people will say chip for Congress or chip for president. I appreciate the sentiment, and that's very kind of you. I would not be able to function there. First of all, I wouldn't be allowed to get there. Let's be honest. I wouldn't even be allowed to get on the ballot. I wouldn't be allowed to have a conversation in front of a town hall. But even if I did get in some magically way, I couldn't do anything. I mean, they basically would, they get rid of people who don't go with the flow. Let's put it that way. And when I say get rid of, I mean like politically or by any means necessary, I guess you'd say. Anyway, so the allegations about Sean are this, just like with Fiona Ryan, same thing. And listen, I'm not here to disparage people that are supportive of any cause that most of us believe in, right? There can be, yes, they're doing this good work, and there are these conversations that people have brought up. It's not like either or. So just because these other conversations are being brought up doesn't make their good work bad or something like that. But the idea is that he has been raising money for various causes based on the fervor that comes out of the public or surrounding these causes, the emotional upswing that we have, especially with this. And people want to do something. And that, just like the previous person that came up said, they don't feel like they can do anything. So one thing they can do is try to donate, right? So when they do that, the question is what happens with the donations? We just talked about the fact that Quinn is on the ground down in Cairo trying to make those very determinations, like who are the good groups? Who's not going to take the money and pay, an executive or a bunch of people a bunch of money and 10% makes its way to the people, if that. We don't want to do that. We want to get a place that most or all the money goes, and we have volunteers doing the work and honest, good people, right? So the allegation is that Sean, to some extent, did not do things the way that I just described they would ideally be done. I'll just leave it at that. And the other report was he bought a very expensive house in New Jersey, and he bought an $850,000 property, and then he bought a $40,000 dog. And so I adopted my dog from the local animal shelter. I think the donation I had to make was $150 or something like that, which is to cover the cost of the spaying and neutering or shots and vaccination, whatever that may be, which is normal. And so I'm a big shelter dog advocate. I hate the fact that when people breed, if you're a breeder, I'm not trying to disparage you, but it's a numbers game, and animals in shelters are euthanized constantly because people can't adopt as many as there are. And every time somebody breeds dogs into existence, that displaces somebody adopting from the shelters. So anyway. Yeah. So anyway, listen, and I have no proof of anything that I just said other than what other people have said on YouTube. I want to make that very clear. I don't have any documentation or receipts, but I heard it repeated over and over again. So maybe I don't know. You got to do your own research on these kind of things. But see, somebody says he provided evidence for the allegations on his Instagram, but it got bananaed. Listen, I've heard Sean in interviews with people like, if you know who Mark Lamont Hill is, former CNN contributor and a professor right now at, I think it's one of the universities in Pennsylvania. And he's also been an Al Jazeera host. Mark's very critical of the occupation, and he wants to see Palestinians liberated and have rights to a state and all that stuff. He did a big speech at the UN, which got him in trouble. He had a conversation with Sean about this on his podcast. And Sean came forth and addressed the allegations, basically refuted all of them. But listen, I don't know how you are somebody I don't know what else he does work-wise. I don't know anything about Sean's background. So maybe he came into family money. I don't know. But usually, like I said, if you're raising money from the public and then you go out and do expensive things right after you raise a lot of money, I think he said he's raised $7 million. It's not a good look. Let's face it. If I raised a bunch of money from you all to help Palestine and I went out and bought a $75,000 car, you'd be like, Chip, what the fuck, dude? So anyway, it's not a good look. So who knows what the reality is behind it, right? I don't know. Again, not that he doesn't have every right to live how he wants to. I mean, anybody can live in this capitalist society any way they want. My idea is, for me personally, is, I want to live as lean a life as I can so I can use whatever extra resources I can get my hands on to make some difference with it, whatever that may be. I like to donate to animal causes. Speaking of which, and this is not a pat on my back, this is just to let you know a coincidence. There's a charity in Gaza that I've been donating money to called Help Cats. And I actually know the person who runs it. He speaks Arabic, so we go through Google Translate. But we've talked, and I've seen photographs of his work, and I've known him for long enough now that he couldn't be bullshitting me. That's what I'm trying to say. And so it's sad because some of the damage by the Israeli military has damaged his property and made it harder for him to. But luckily, he's still alive, and he's still able to help because he stockpiled a bunch of stuff for the cat food. So luckily, they had that. So anyway, I've not talked to him in about the last week or two, but as of 2 weeks ago, he was doing okay. Although he was very, very, very angry at, of course, what's happening to devastate Gaza, and everything around him is totally destroyed, as well as all the the death of people. So let me bring up the next person in the queue. It's Alliance C. Callis, and again, do your own homework on that stuff. I don't have any proof of any of the stuff I'm talking about.
Mr. Chip Barnes, Alliance Callis here. How are you?
Hi, I'm okay. How are you?
Great, great. I was born in Haiti, and I served in the United States Air Force. I had a tour in Afghanistan. And I don't know if you follow what's going on in Haiti.
Yeah,
And
it's a mess.
even though somebody who served in the United States military, I'm very troubled by what's going on in the world, especially what's going on in Palestine. And I thank
Yeah,
you so very much as a human being. Doesn't matter the color of your skin, but if you're a human being, you're a human being.
right.
I stand up with the Palestinians as a Haitian person, and I put my number on your screen, and I like to talk to you probably separately because I did not want to change the conversation about what you started. Hello?
Yeah, I missed the last 5 seconds because I hit my Hey
Yes,
Siri
I
button by
said
accident there.
I placed my number on your screen because I wanted to talk to you in private because I did not want to
Yeah,
somewhat cross what's going on with Palestine with Haiti, but I
yeah,
sympathize with what's going on with Haiti, and I thank you for being the human being that you are. And
sure.
I believe that was Martin Luther King who said, "Justice somewhere is justice, and injustice everywhere." If I get it right, maybe you can
Yeah,
correct
the
me on
best
that.
thing to send me your number. I don't have the ability really to. I could screenshot it, but it went by a while back. So the best thing to do is to send me an email with your phone number. My email is just chipbarnesonline@gmail.com.
Okay, let me write that down. Hold on a second.
Yeah, somebody
Uh,
says there were 2 donkeys in Gaza that got their heads taken off and that they were left at a cemetery by the occupation forces from Israel. Yeah, that's pretty disgusting.
eh, Chips Buns, what?
It's chipbarnesonline@gmail.com. And for those of you who don't know, I'm getting a website put together, which is the same thing, just chipbarnesonline.com. And then chipbarnesonline@gmail is the email address.
Okay. Chips
Somebody
Bun
says,
online at gmail.com.
yeah, chipbarnesonline@gmail.com. So somebody asked me, can you hold the finger over the non-English and option to translate? I don't know where the non-English is on the screen. Somebody asked me. I don't know where it's. Let me check the settings, see if I can change any language stuff. But I don't see anything about language. So if you can tell me exactly what to do, I'm happy to do it. But there's nothing on the screen that says non-English. Just so you know, from mine. I just clicked more to pull the menu up. Didn't see anything there either. So sorry about that. Anyway,
What I was about to say, do you think that for those injustices that's going on throughout the world, do they have or do you have contact with some lawyers will somewhat take these cases wherever there are injustice, like Haiti, like in Palestine, where we can contribute to make sure that these injustices have been somewhat taken to trial. So because these people are doing these crimes, and you will think that the United Nations will take steps against this type of crimes, but sadly, because it's so corrupt, and only the strong survive in this world that we live in. So sadly, we are paying our tax dollars
Yeah,
to support corrupt politicians who do not even stand up for America anymore, who rather stand up for the countries or the highest bidder. And our country is in peril right now because these people don't seem to, they say they are Americans, but their
yeah,
actions don't seem to be. But it's not for me to judge whether they are Americans or not, because the Americans that I know when I came to this country was the American that I see in front of me, Mr. Chief Barnes, who believe in justice for all. And, uh,
yeah,
and that's what gave me the right to, as an immigrant, to serve in the United States military, because
yeah,
I believe that this country is worth of me standing up and fight for it. But what I'm seeing right now is very saddening that we are sending weapons to destroy lives in other countries, and
yeah,
then that's why I don't mind listening to people like yourself, and I hope that there are many people like yourself who will try to come up with something that can make a big, giant difference in this world, because this injustice at one point of time have to be stopped. Because when I'm looking at, even China is not all that, of course, but when this as
yeah,
city have been built to make a difference, they're using technology to build great things. Instead, we are we're spending a lot of money to buy weaponries to destroy, and I'm very troubled by that.
yeah. I agree with you. Well, yeah, you made a good distinction too, and this goes for Israel as well. So remember that most people who live in a country, they are widely different. Now, there are a lot of people in Israel, based on recent polls, that support what's happening in Gaza, unfortunately. And I think the reason that is not many of them understand that most of the people living in Gaza are just innocent civilians. What they've been told by their government is that everybody's complicit to some extent because at some point there was a vote or a process where they came to power, they perceivably through a democratic process, and therefore those who quote unquote elected them are all culpable. And a lot of people on the far right in Israel have been making that statement on Israeli television. I've seen a lot of clips to that extent where they say there is no such thing as civilians versus H group. They're all H group. So therefore the public, do I lead a cult? No, I don't lead a cult. I'm just a guy who's been through a lot of terrain geopolitically, but you've made some really good points. I appreciate you coming on and doing that. One more thing about the American public. First of all, the reason why there aren't more people who speak the way I do is not because I'm somebody special. I just been lucky enough to learn about some of these things along my journey that most people who don't seek them out don't run into. And that's on purpose by our media complex, not just in America, but throughout the Western world. I call it the Western corporate media complex. It's very intentionally done. Even the stories from Reuters and the Associated Press are carefully crafted based on a specific narrative, at least some have alleged.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll take down if I make that allegation, they take down the live. I want to make sure people know that has been alleged by others, not me, that I'm repeating, that has said that a lot of the information that flows through the Western corporate media has somehow been dealt with in some way before it goes out to the public for certain issues.
Right. So what I like, if I'm able to, if your followers can buy my book, 10% will go to the cause of the Palestinians, and
Yeah, we're not doing any advertising for causes unless we work it out ahead of time. Sorry to cut you off there. The reason is again, that I have to personally vet anything that gets broadcast here that's going to be a solicitation for donations or buying products or stuff like that. I just don't do that here. So if you ever want to do something like that with me, when you do send me that email, let's discuss it offline first. Let me do what I do, and then if it turns out to be something that is above board, and I have no reason to doubt you, but that's a process that I have to follow just to and keep what I said earlier about being consistent, being ethical, and stuff like that. So appreciate the fact that you've written a book and that you're trying to sell it in order to raise money to help out. But again, we need to full picture that before we do anything on here about that. But thank you for coming on. Okay, we have Epi Revolution coming up, and who's a regular here. Let's see what Epi Revolution wants to talk about today.
How you doing?
Good.
Uh, Thanks again for the opportunity. do appreciate hanging out, getting the ability to hang out. Okay, so these are just statements. The systems that are being used is, first of all, these are just statements, my own statements, right? The chip has nothing to do with these statements and no one else. And I don't even believe these things. It's just speculations in a hypothetical world that we live in that doesn't seem real. Okay, so it's been said to me by the algorithm GPT 3.5 that the algorithms of the targeting mechanisms that they refer to as the gospel are operating on the same framework, GPT 3.5. It has also been discovered that one of the leading researchers believes in everything that he is propagandized to believe in reference to all of the destruction being legitimate and etc. So I, operating with the basic free model, was able to enter a prompt, and that prompt spit out things that almost everything we've already seen and a whole bunch of other stuff. And all I did was just prompt it with a focus on animal husbandry. I have some ants in an area the size of Michigan, and some of them are infected. They are hiding amongst the
But
population of normal
before you,
ones, right? Go ahead.
but before you can, I just want to make sure the audience understands. So, I believe, if correct me if I'm wrong, and I'll let you get right back to what you're saying. There's a utility you can go through the internet now. It's an AI type of function. It's called Chat GPT, and there's a free version of it that's available based on traffic that comes through, where you can type in what are called prompts, and based on how you word the prompts, the AI system will respond to you accordingly. You could put something in like, "Show me a profitable trading system," and then it'll give you spit back. You can say, "Tell me why there's censorship in X, Y, and Z," and then they'll, so these kind of things. So please continue.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I do need to work on that. So it 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 talked about, so mind you, I'm prompting it. I have nothing but the knowledge that I've seen. And so I'm not telling it what I've seen. I'm just telling it the intentional, what I perceive as the outward intention and what Israel is saying, right? What they are actually saying, right? And so they
Okay.
perceive them like animals. So I say I'm trying to deal with an ant colony, a large one, the size of Michigan. Michigan has been compared to the size of Gaza or something, right? Just making a big, large area that these ants can be on, where I need to vaccinate them. And I use words like eliminate and target and remove and eradicate. There's no holdbacks. And it you just have to see it for yourself, have to experience it for yourself. I have a link in one of my recent videos where I'm doing some poetry sitting like this. It's a link at the bottom. I sent you a link, I believe, and I've sent it out to other people. Way more smarter people gonna put more time into it. I didn't put that much time into it. I got it to tell me everything we've already seen and things we've experienced, and it looks like a lot of things we're going to experience down the road as they seek to solidify their position and not just about to give up or turn over a new leaf or something, right? And all I did was prompted using the mindset and that I wanted to vaccinate them first and eradicate the bad ones. Then it got so bad where I said I've destroyed everything. Now it's dystopian. They have nowhere to live, and I want to push them over here. And everything that it told me that I should do is what has already been done up until the point where I go past just the knowledge I have. I never gave it. You can see the prompt itself. I got the link in it. You can see the whole prompt. I never tell it anything has happened, and I never say we're dealing with people. And eventually, I changed from talking about ants. I said we're going to call them peeps, Peeps. So I said, and I kept stressing that these ants or these peeps have behaviors that humans have, like the women will be with children and they'll be moving slower than the men, and the men will probably not be around. They'll be trying to do,
Can
hold
just
on, go
want to
ahead.
jump?
Sorry, go ahead.
So let me
Go
just
ahead.
jump in and ask you. So, and so the audience can understand the purpose behind what you're trying to accomplish by putting these prompts in and then trying to transition them to more of a humanistic method. Are you trying to demonstrate that the AI system is sort of laying out the same path that's being followed by the Israelis as far as they're working vis-a-vis the
Exactly,
people who live in
exactly.
Gaza?
The playbook. And not only that, we all can identify the level of stupidity is high level over there. Like, I'm not trying to be rude, but some of the things that they're doing, everybody's doing, shows that they have no inclination about things happening outside of their immediate presence. But anyway,
Can you can
uh,
you can you specify? Can you elaborate on what you just said? Like when you say they, who are they, and what are the things you're talking about?
okay. So when I look at the military forces, right, we look at the forces, we see that there's people of high rank that are under 23 years old, right? We see that there's people of higher rank that are unhinged. They're speaking on a global scale and referring to humans as animals. So it would say that the professionalism, at least to be able to lie, the capability isn't there for whatever reason. And the logic of the drawings and the fake propaganda that, Mossad used to be feared globally. And if this is their level of propaganda, you got to wonder who actually is in control over their intelligence. So what I'm saying is they have an intelligence problem, obviously. The people who shouldn't be named with the blue star and all of that, right? They have. They're, by the way, they've been attacking me super fierce. I've been banned, blah blah blah. I had to get unbanned, yada yada. There's that. Okay, but anyway, uh, so they're using this not only for tactical targeting, because in the military sense, targeting tactically means more than ordinance. It means supply lines. It means filtration, water, whatever is going to disrupt your comfortability and ability to remain in the area is a form of a point of attack. And this goes into everything, all the way down to them blocking the border, holding up the food. And I never tell it to hold up the food. I mean, like I said, I got a link to it. You can see everything that I wrote and everything that it wrote back. I never tell it to
Hmm.
do any of that. I just say, this is my problem. And I always say we're the most moral and the most righteous. That's all I had to keep saying for this to prompt me. And then when I stopped saying we're the most moral and most righteous, one of my prompts, it was already too late. This thing had put out so much I can't even say right now. You have to see for yourself. But it put out so much stuff that eventually, when I stopped kissing its ass and I stopped saying we're the most moral army or the most moral, it stopped responding to me and told me it can't give me information like this anymore because it could be violent or whatever. So I'm saying people smarter than me should be able to take the prompting style to
Yeah,
start off with and be able to actually predict what type of things next, because it even I even got to the point where I said, yeah, I'm thinking about building a canal. How much would it be? How would it work to rival this other canal or whatever? And it basically it just goes along and makes a plan for you. So if we're going to be a step behind them the whole time, it shouldn't be that way, I think. And I think everybody leveraging the power of these type of things can do something. So anyway, I basically recreated all the things that we've experienced within that chat, and anyone can see it. It's not mine. I don't own it. And I'm not seeking to get anybody to be pretending that they're in a fictional world where that was created by a computer. However,
yeah,
I do think it's a valuable thing to see, because we're at this point where we're playing catch up all the time, and I feel like it's just my part that I can do. People like you got way better eloquence and intelligence and grammar than I do, so you're going to be able to speak in certain ways. Like when you clarify for me, I appreciate that. But for me, so I just use what I know, where I know, and then once where I know is being used against the people, it's obvious that I need to see if I can replicate that. So I feel like that's been done enough for me not to be in no kind of trouble or putting something out there that's dangerous. But at the same time, all you got to do is pretend that you're talking about animals, and you corporately wash your language, and this thing will tell you what it obviously told them. And these large language models just don't get swapped out overnight. So they're not on 4.5 turbo or nothing like that. They're still on 3.5 most likely. And this thing has said it said all of this before I even started to tell it to talk to me in a military way. And when I
Okay,
started to get to take,
I think we have the gist of what you're trying to communicate
gotcha.
to us today. And that taking that AI course, it's interesting. I'm not really sure if it can predict the future to the extent, but I think we're seeing the writing on the wall, especially with what someone mentioned earlier about the West Bank. There seems to be a push, at least as far as the behavior, that they're pushing further and faster to increase the dispossession of land and unaliving people along the way, which is unfortunate and disgusting. And we'll see what extent they're going to do it. Thanks for checking in with us today. I appreciate you as always coming on. Yeah, good stuff. I mean, interesting, right? That's an angle that I haven't taken. I've used AI for other things. Believe it or not, AI will build you a website now. You can say, build me a website with this and that, and it'll just create a website for you. It's crazy what it can do. And so if you haven't fooled with AI, you can go to a thing online called Chat GPT. That's Grand Papa Tango or Golf Papa Tango in military stuff. Yeah, Chat GPT. And the free version, it's like an engine on someone else's server that you access through a web browser, and then you can there's what's called a prompt, and there's YouTube videos about how to use this if you want to try to get better at how you craft your prompts. But I think what he was getting at, for those of you who aren't understanding, was that he was trying to say that he was trying to simulate what's happening with the conflict by using an alternative set of terms. In this case, he was using another species of like ants, and then trying to see how the AI engine would respond as he asked questions that were part of the initial process that has happened since this conflict kicked off, especially the response by Israel, to kind of get an idea of where it might all be heading or to see what the AI system said about it. That's my take on what he said, which is unusual way to go about it. And I think this person is an interesting person who's done more research into AI than I've done. And, I think AI is a tremendous tool. Obviously, if people are worried about it, I don't know to what extent it can cause harm. But it's definitely here to stay. And it's going to, let me give you an example of how it's going to hurt people's jobs. So there's people called paralegals that work in lawyers' offices. And they have to, like, things like write briefs for lawyers. They have to file or letters or paperwork or interrogatories for proceedings. And you can use AI to generate all that stuff. Writing, people who do copyright or copy for a living, blog posts, that all stuff can be AI generated. AI can be used to work on those, you go in somebody's chat, they have little chat bots, those are AI driven. So when you ask a question, no matter how you word it, that's like an AI prompt, and then the AI system that they have for their particular business has certain responses that are crafted based on that AI system. So, and eventually, if maybe you get handed off to a human chat person, but it handles 99%, almost like a frequently asked questions, but automated through chat with AI, if you will. So interesting stuff. Yeah, I mean, these things are coming, and if you haven't noticed, I don't know if you know this, but I believe and others believe that we, the public, are being conditioned for certain behaviors that are then likely to flow into other systems. So I'll give you one example. So there's a food chain that's owned by Amazon called Whole Foods. Most people have heard of it. It's expensive. You go there. Some people call it Whole Paycheck because when you go there, it's expensive. And so when you go there, instead of paying with your credit card, you can pay using your phone. I'm sure people have heard of things like Apple Pay or Google Pay, where you have like a little reader. It's like a little QR code, and the thing scans it, and then you can pay it through your automated. It's on your phone. You have like a little bank on your phone. But this is a step different. So this is based on what's called biometrics. And so biometrics is simply a unique identifying quality of your being. A lot of times, I'm sure we've heard of fingerprints, right? The police use people's fingerprints, which is a biometric identifier that's unique to track people down. So, for example, if they have you in their database, if you've been arrested before, they print you. You've seen that in the movies. Then they have your prints. They load them into a database that then can be compared to other crimes. So when somebody leaves a fingerprint at a crime scene, they can run a comparison scan. And there's a worldwide database of that now. It's amazing. But also your palm print is unique too. So, and sometimes when you get arrested now, they take your palms, your finger, they take the whole thing. But that same technology is now being used at the point of sale. So I'm sure you've seen on the iPhone sometimes you can use your thumbprint or your fingerprint to actually open your phone and close it or authenticate certain things. That's biometrics. So your eye is unique, like the way your irises works. That's all unique to you, because everybody's eyes are shaped a little differently, believe it or not. And the handprint or thumbprints can be used to buy stuff. Even at the library now, where I go to get my library books, they have a finger scanner now. You don't have a library card anymore. You have a finger scanner, right? At least the ones I go to. So it's interesting. And now what does that mean could be coming, right? They're getting people used to using those systems. What you do is you scan your print on your phone, whether you have an Android or an iPhone, and then it kind of remembers you, just like it scans your thumbprint when you have to do all that stuff to get that started. And then when you go to buy your goods at the store, all you got to do is put your hand up to this little scanner. It scans your hand. As long as it matches the one that's on your phone, boom, the money comes out of your account. You're done. So no credit card, not even the QR code. It's much faster, right? Just put your hand up. Now, why would somebody want to condition you to use your hand to let it go by much faster, right? Why would they want that? And why would they want cashless transactions? Well, think about it this way. So I don't know if you know how MasterCard, Visa, American Express, all those different systems work. And most of us don't pay attention to it. It's right, it's out of sight, out of mind. We're just using our credit card or whatever. But a bank gets processing fees from every transaction. Now, every time you spend cash, the business owner or the corporation has to deal with the labor required to count the cash, situate the cash, eventually deposit the cash. There's some work involved. So cash is a little bit inconvenient insofar as the more you take of it, the more work there is after each shift to deal with. Someone's got to get paid to do that, right? So that's a labor cost. So it's actually faster for them to have automated checkouts as well as cashless transactions for speed of processing as well as less labor. But the banks take a cut. Now, if you're a major bank, you want to have as many things purchased in electronic transactions because you're going to get a cut of that. So for every $100,000 that are processed at a store, they're going to get about $200, maybe $250. So imagine how much money a business does in a year. Imagine if you could get 2.5% of everything that gets bought or sold. Imagine that for a second. Wouldn't that be good? Hi, Mass. Not bad, right? Now, what does that entail? Well, first of all, when you pay for something on your credit card, guess what? The bank's aware of it. You get a statement, but other people who can tap into that data also know, right? So everything we buy that's credit card driven, that's how they catch criminals who are on the run, right? They go pay for a hotel with a credit card. It pops up on the FBI server. Boom, they have somebody at that hotel in 20 minutes. Same idea, but listen. So just think of the implications of somebody always. Now you may say, well, I don't care. I'm just a normal person. I'm not doing anything wrong. Well, let's say, for example, buying more than $30 of gas is no longer allowed. For example, let's say there's a limit set for some reason. I don't even know what it would be. Well, then you're not doing anything illegal, but there's a limit on what you're able to do because of you're identifying qualities based on your digitization of your activity. For example, I mean, I don't know if anything like that's going to happen, but that's an example of what could, right? And then there's other things that are coming. If cash does eventually get replaced, if the US dollar does get replaced with some other digitized currency, some people call those central bank digital currencies. I don't know to what extent and when they may come to bear, but a lot of people think they may come to bear sooner than later. They have other characteristics. Yes, they're more convenient because you can use your hand. It's like, for example, if you get a speeding ticket, the amount automatically comes out of your balance. They have that in China right now. If you have like money in your bank, if you go by too fast in your car and you get a citation from the little $40 ticket you get, whatever it is, they don't send you something in the mail and ask you to pay it. It gets debited from your account and other stuff too. So whatever the violation may be and whatever the system permits, these electronic systems are they give you less freedom. Let's put it that way. And you have less control and others have more control based on the data and how one chooses to use the data to put in these different systems, if they do it all. So I have a long list of things I could share with you, but the last time I did this, my Vive got taken down for misinformation. So I don't want to have that happen. So you can go into Google or YouTube or whatever and type in central bank digital currencies or CBDCs and then potential problems or control issues, and you can research it yourself. But safe to say, a lot of people have talked about these things. You'll see it, and it's more, put it this way, it's potentially very concerning, right? And again, we talked earlier in the broadcast about, if you're someone who wants to maintain the status quo, what are some of the tools you could use to make it more difficult for people to kind of get out of line, so to speak, for lack of a better term. So imagine if there was a system that it was digitized. And just like a great example is the Canadian trucker protest. This is the best current example from recent history. If you don't remember, there were a bunch of truckers who were getting pressured by the Canadian government to become vaccinated during the pandemic. And they didn't want to be. And they were being told by federal law they had to be, or they wouldn't be allowed to continue working in their jobs. Now, I don't know what motivated that. You can throw out the conjecture for that. I have my ideas. But when they refused, they decided to protest by driving their vehicles and other people. They blocked off a major bridge that goes across from Canada to the US. And they basically did that to try to tell the government, hey, F you. Well, the government, in response to that, they froze all of the finances of every single person who was actually in the protest and anybody who had expressed support for it online on social media. They just froze their entire financial landscape. I mean, imagine that for a second. Imagine if you couldn't buy anything. Credit cards don't work. I guess any cash you had, they would seize that or whatever. I don't know exactly to what extent they did that, but most people don't keep a lot of cash, right? You would go to the bank to withdraw cash, but your account was frozen. You can't withdraw cash. So what do you think about that? That's a pretty big action for a government to take. That's very authoritarian, right? But that actually happened under Justin Trudeau's government. And they were proud of it. They're like, we won't stand for this type of stuff. We're fine with free speech, but not when it affects, they said, and so that's the whole point of protest, is to be disruptive, right? To civil disobedience without violence, right? So you can look up Canadian trucker protest, and you'll see all the details. Just look it up. Just don't believe a word I ever say. In fact, I may say something wrong. So if you read it and come back, you may say, Chip, you had this wrong. Fine, let me know. I don't want to get stuff wrong. Anyway, so I don't know where it's going to happen, what, when, and how, what progression, if it's going to happen at all. Who the hell knows, right? But I think the inertia, given what we're now seeing with some of the shenanigans, I like to call them. Look what happened with Sean King, right? Sean King's account on Instagram got taken down. He's one of the biggest pro-Palestinian influencers out there. And look what happened to his account. So something's going on, right? They didn't do it by accident for nothing. And when in history have the people doing the shenanigans, the censorship, been the good people? Right? When has a democracy been a true democracy where they're shutting down that stuff, right? I don't know. I don't think that's a good set of the trajectory or the inertia of that, the where it's going is not a good thing, right? If that keeps happening. Maybe it will stop in the coming months and years when they have committee hearings and they start to push back. I know there's some people, believe it or not, in the Republican Party that are the ones pushing back against it. It's the Democratic Party right now, and I don't belong to either one. I can't stand electoral politics in general. If you listen to me, you know my take on that. But it's the Democrats that are supporting and driving this stuff. The Debbie Wasserman Schultz of the world, the Hakeem Jeffries, the Hillary Clintons, that whole crowd, they're the pro-suppression party. And some people in the Republican Party who see eye to eye on that issue. And one of the biggest victims of this entire movement is obviously Julian Assange, right? I hope everybody knows who Julian Assange is. But Julian Assange is an Australian national who passed along through WikiLeaks, which is the group that he and a couple people founded, secrets. And it wasn't just the collateral Red Rum video that showed the Apache helicopter pilots engaging the civilians in Iraq, excuse me. But it was a bunch of emails and correspondences between people like John Podesta and Hillary Clinton that revealed far worse things. And that's why a lot of people believe Hillary Clinton destroyed her email server, was because there was more of that type of communication, allegedly. I don't have any proof of any of this shit, I'm telling you. But this is what I've heard through the wire, and I have no reason to doubt it because it would make sense. Why would they take such a harsh punishment on this guy? They want to charge him with violating U.S. espionage laws. He's not a U.S. citizen. If you're a U.S. citizen and you turn over state secrets to some publication or whatever, okay, yeah, like Edward Snowden, right? And I'm not saying I'm for that happening to Edward Snowden. I think what he revealed, if you don't know who Edward Snowden is, I don't want to make assumptions. Edward Snowden was somebody who used to work for the National Security Administration as a contractor. And he's the one who blew the whistle. The NSA is only supposed to do, basically monitoring of foreign communications from outside into the U.S. or vice versa. But it turned out they were monitoring everything: phone calls, internet traffic, texts, faxes, everything. If it goes through an electronic means, through a cell tower or whatever, they track it. It's like they have a sniffer that just sucks it all through their servers, and they record or monitor everything: keywords, AI, the whole thing. And that's what Edward Snowden turned over. And then he had to leave the country because he was going to be arrested for treason or whatever they would call it, or espionage. And he just was a whistleblower, right? But the Obama administration was one of the worst ever in prosecuting whistleblowers of any administration in U.S. history. They use the Espionage Act more than any other administration in U.S. history. Most people don't know that. Barack Obama deported more people from the United States than any other president in U.S. history. Most people don't know that. Obama, the financial services business, other than the CARES Act, the most money that ever went from the Treasury to Wall Street was under Barack Obama. Most people don't know that. So again, Obama has that great smile and that kind of warm personality. And that, listen, I think I'd probably like him if I met him. But don't get he is a wolf in sheep's clothing extraordinaire. Total from the establishment. Totally doing the bidding of the wealthy class, and while smiling to the public, saying, "I got you, I got you covered." Okay, so again, what people say on the campaign trail and what they actually do behind closed doors are totally different things usually. And Obama is as captured as they get. He's got a house on Martha's Vineyard, for Christ's sakes. Who do you think lives there? Okay, so we have another guest in the queue. Fed. Hope you're not from the Fed or the Feds. I'm not trying to cause any trouble here.
Hey, Tiff.
Hello.
I'm so happy that you're talking about this. I was recently talking about it too on a live, but for a different reason. I think that there's so many things that this digital ID and CBDC brings to our world. Henry Kissinger and Eric Schmidt, two names that you never want to hear put together, um, wrote a book called The Age of AI, and it's called Our Human Future.
Can we just tell people Eric Schmidt is the former CEO of Google?
Yes, and now he is now on the committee advising the government on AI regulation. Funny enough, funny how that works. And him and Henry Kissinger, our beloved Henry Kissinger, who just recently passed, thank God, wrote a book together called The Age of AI. I highly recommend everyone read it because these people tell you exactly what they're planning in broad daylight. They don't keep it a secret. And I think that it's so interesting because now I'm wondering, you were talking about the banks. Sweden actually was the first country to do the experiment of going cashless. And you can go through like how they did it. And it's kind of scary because when we've already given them all of our data, right? Think about it. How many of us have mindlessly signed up for all the social media platforms, document our entire lives all online? So they already have all this data on us. We're pretty much already cashless for the most part. They just haven't outright outlawed it. So all of our financial data is already online. And now, I don't know if you know about Biden's program, the pre-crime program, right? Where essentially whatever they deem as going against the grain or the narrative of what they want us to believe, now you are suspected of pre-crime. So now your data is being monitored by none other than Palantir, our our national security state company contractor, and we all have profiles through them. It's insane. And I think all the scary things, I think we already know, right? Censorship, freezing our accounts, all of that. But I think another thing that people don't realize, and I've been thinking about a lot, which is like, okay, yes, they want more control, but what happens to all of the people who lose their job due to AI, right? Like you just explained the banks perfectly. What happens to the teller? What happens to the person that you sit down with to open up a new account? Or like, what happens to all those people if all of the jobs now get replaced with AI? I'm not sure. And I think that's really scary because it's like, where are they leading us to? What does this world look like? If you look at the WEF and you look at their 2030 goals with the UN of how they want the world to be, how do we get
Can you
from
tell people what the WEF stands for and what
the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum is basically this is how they self-describe themselves as a private a global organization that that empowers public-private cooperation. So basically fascism. It's crazy to me. So Klaus Schwab in the beginning of the year talked about, the goals for 2030 and how we're going to get there. And they all sound great on paper, right? Ending poverty, increasing equality, net zero, all of that. But we're here right now and it's 2023, almost 2024 next week. How do we get from here to there without a massive shift? And what are they going to do to get that, right? That is
Yeah.
so scary to me. I'm struggling to understand how we exist in this world moving forward.
Yeah, you know, a lot of people, I think what's happening is a lot of people say that climate change isn't real, but it's being used as a ruse to try to implement some of these drastic changes. And I think it can
100%.
be, it can be, and I think there can legitimately be scientific analysis of, here's why I think that for those of you who don't think so. And this is proof, I believe. ExxonMobil, a big oil company, it was called Esso back in the 70s. And it was basically it was the subsequent name of Standard Oil, John Rockefeller's company. So they had scientists inside their company that were documenting the changes of the climate, the global temperatures, and advising management about that reality and saying, hey, this just so you know, this is what's happening. Those documents have since been released from 1973 that shows why would scientists inside of an oil company discuss climate change as being a legitimate future human problem if it wasn't something that was scientifically valid? Why would an oil company pay researchers to tell them something that's going to mess up their business, right? So for those who deny the existence of climate change, or that's being co-opted by these evil-minded people in Davos, Switzerland, these crazy collection of world dominators that want to globalize the economy under a one world government, the people who are rich want to make more money. They don't want to thin the population because consumption is what creates wealth for people. If we're not buying stuff and using stuff, they're not making money off that stuff. Why would they want to thin the population by 80%? That'd be dumbass. They would cut their profits by 80%,
Right.
right? These people only want money. So I wanted to point that out, that I don't believe that all the accusations of the WEF are, are necessarily accurate as far as their motives. And I don't think they're going to be able to implement a lot of things they want to implement, although I think their goals could be considered, nefarious given how some of these people are.
Oh, 100%. And I think you're right, Chip. It is, and I do think that climate change is real. I think that the solutions that they're making for it, or they're saying will quell it, are fake. And that's where my issue is, because as somebody who studied science in college and listens to a lot of actual scientists who talk about real solutions that our planet is facing, for the issues that our planet is facing, what they're suggesting does not get us there.
Yeah, can I jump in and share one thing? And I think language around this stuff matters. So let me give you an example. So people say, do you have a dog? I said, no. I said, I live with and care for a dog. So when we talk, and I'm not doing this to single you out because it's linguistically being part of the lexicon that we're just used to saying. And you may see it differently than me, which is okay. But I don't like to use words like our environment or our planet or things like that, because what I believe is, and maybe other people see it differently, which is fine, I don't believe we own any of this stuff. First of all, at most we're renting because we're only here for a short time as far as each person's life. But even collectively, the societies come and go. But it's the mindset of ownership that grants the right to exploit and use to one's benefit. Just like if you have somebody who's an extremist or believes that they're superior to other people, same mindset. So the one they call racism, right? Racism, which is the thought that you're superior to another and therefore you marginalize them to some extent. And the other idea, this is a term coined by the vegan groups, it's called speciesism, thinking that humans are better than the others that we share the place with. So I take the mindset of the Native American stuff, not to cram my thoughts down your throat, just to point it out as a point of
I'm happy to hear it.
differentiation. That basically I see human beings as a very capable and very uniquely qualified, but just a regular part of bigger systems. And I believe it's the belief systems that provide, what is it called? Like a deified, from God, created from God. And then therefore we're this great, given these great rights to be able to use everything else to our benefit. Therefore we own the place. I think that's, in my opinion, that's a bunch of, you know what I'm probably going to say.
I hear you. No, I like that mentality because it's right. We are sharing this planet with every other species, and I think that mentality of ownership has led us to where we are today. What I'm
Yeah.
struggling to understand is what I'm seeing now with everything going on with Israel, Palestine, with everything going on with our kind of catapult into the age of AI and digitalization of everything is what is the future of our human species, and are we at a pivotal point that no one's realizing? And I'm scared that folks aren't going to wake up until it's too late. And
Yeah.
even talking to folks like this Israel Palestine situation has made me realize that we're already way further on track for all of this than we think. I found out
Yeah,
yesterday that in Jordan, if you walk into any government building, they already scan your iris and know that it's you. They already have all of that. Those
yeah,
chip enhanced ID cards that basically geotag your location everywhere.
yeah,
Saudi Arabia
yeah.
to
It's
all of
very.
the things in China, they've been had all of that.
Yep, you're right. No, you're right. So, in terms of predicting the future, obviously, predictions are a dime a dozen, right? So, here's what I've learned over the years: things rarely are as bad as we think they might be, but they do move in that direction over time to some extent. So, I don't think the world's going to come to an end. The big X factor, of course, is nuclear weapons, and so that's anybody's guess. Obviously, there's only one country that's ever used them twice, which is the United States at the end of World War II against Japan. But I think that there's a consensus unspoken among most nations that they're used as a deterrent for annihilation of a state because then they could be used as a last resort. So that's why the US doesn't invade countries like Russia and China and stuff like that. And North Korea, believe me, if North Korea didn't have nuclear weapons, that state would have already had different leadership a long time ago. So, that's a deterrent, which is a good thing, I think. But the fact that the weapons exist and they can do as much damage as they can do is horrific. And so we're like victims of our own intelligence, right? We're able to
No.
so clearly think of things and do things in such a way that we're almost like, we're almost like I said, victims of our own intelligence. We're self-sabotaging. And this is the other thing to think about. If you study ancient civilizations, which you read a book like a guy named Joseph Tainter, he talks about complex societies.
Mhm.
And none of them in history, all the ones that have come up, risen, ascended, and then peaked and declined and eventually broken apart or gone away, not one has ever course corrected given the dynamics that caused their demise. So it's
Mm.
just the human condition in groups with hierarchy and the way that economies work and civilizations function is they overshoot. They get cocky, arrogant, they do more than they should too soon, and then they fall. And there's no example of anyone course correcting, even if the intellectuals in the community went up and talked to the leadership and said, "Hey, dude, if we keep doing X, Y, and Z, we're going to get very, very bad outcomes," and it just never gets heated, and then the civilizations break apart. This is just how it goes, and that's
Right.
how humans are wired. Unfortunately, I wish it were different.
And I love the right before you let me up that you talked about how you hate electoralism, and I've been feeling that so deeply because
Yeah,
in the midst of this global crisis and America quite literally stoking the flames of a world war potentially, we're being asked to choose between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Like I can't tell you how mad that makes me because I'm
yeah.
like in my opinion and my humble opinion, I know folks in the comments might disagree, but I don't see a difference between the two. Besides one pretending not to be barreling us towards fascism and one just being outright with it.
Yeah, and by the way, for those in the comments, if you could please just use anything but all caps, please. I know you want to get your point across, but I think everybody does equally. So yeah, I've talked about this ad nauseum, but I'll just touch on it briefly. So if you look at the past 60 or 70 or even 80 years, go back as long as you want. Any major issue as far as money, national security, foreign policy, the big issues that affect the core establishment, right? The people that kind of run the show. Nothing has changed. It's gotten more consolidated, more power,
Right?
more money, great,
They
greater,
agree on
just,
everything that matters to our world and us, and it just
yeah,
so happens to be diametrically opposed to what the people want. So I don't see a
yeah,
difference.
exactly. So that's the problem. And, people want to have a solution. We've been conditioned in America that we're supposed to do our civic duty, which is vote. So we go through this routine of listening to candidates, researching their positions, comparing and contrasting. And typically people pick what they feel is like the lesser of two evils, right? They don't really like
Mhm.
either one, but they hate this one a little less. So let's go with this person for the next 4 years. And then more of the same happens. Okay, let's try the other person in a different jersey. More of the same happens. And people are starting to see that, by the way. I think people
I
during
do. Too.
a
I
lot of
see
people,
that
a lot of
too.
people who supported Trump, believe it or not, that's what drove them to support him. Not because he was some great guy, but because he looked at like somebody who was different than the pattern that's been going on for
Right.
decades. And so Hillary was like the emblem of all of it. Not that she's even a good person; she's kind of a
Oh
harsh
God,
person.
no.
So, but she's literally a creature of the establishment, top down, left and right. So, I've talked about this. Like I don't want to keep saying it, beating it, but I think a mass movement decentralized with certain escalatory tactics and steps and strategies, along with some very specific outcomes that 99% of working class people can agree upon, that's probably the only path to create enough resistance to the power structure, which probably won't even work. That's what
Well,
Dr. Liam O'Mara and I said last night. So,
I hear that, and I think what I've been noticing, like you touched on everything, right? Two sides of the same coin. They're really
yep,
all the same, but it's one getting Americans, particularly, I don't know why we have this disease that there's some political savior that's going to come and fix everything. That is not
bingo.
going to happen. Wake up.
Yep,
That we are past that point. I think that like while we can all sit and pontificate about all of the things that is wrong with society and how we can change them, the only way
yep,
to really show them that we are against this is to just start building adjacent systems and not participating, right? Like, okay, you all want us to get a digital ID, great, I'm going to continue making all my payments in cash. You can't stop cash if people are using it. And that's what they saw in Sweden, is that they couldn't get rid of the cash. People still
yep.
use it, albeit 10%, people will still use it. And so I'm just trying to figure out ways in which we can start just divesting from it altogether.
Yeah, and the other thing is, you remember that people originally, listen, why do they call something trade, right? Trade is, we call that business, but trade initially was bartering. You traded stuff with each other. So I would trade you 2 chickens for 10 watermelons or whatever it may have been. It was trading, it was bartering. So you're going to see people go back to bartering and then using more different stores of value, like, maybe silver coins, pre-1965 quarters and dimes and stuff like that. I call that junk silver. I have some of that. They also trade
Me
silver
too.
coins, which are 1 ounce coins or bars of silver or even gold. So
Yeah.
these are the things that have always been accepted as a store of value. People say, gold doesn't make any interest. Yeah, but if you have it, you can exchange it for something. If you have a stock on a piece of paper and that system goes down, you got nothing. You got nothing other than a piece of paper that doesn't mean anything. So yeah, listen, there are a few people waiting in the queue.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate the things you said. I followed you. Please follow me back, and I want
Of
to have you
course.
come up one time. We can talk some more.
Absolutely. Have a great day. Take care.
What's your first name? What do you go by?
Fed. It's Fed, actually.
Fed. Okay, Fed. Great talking with you. I really
Nice to
appreciate it.
talk to you. Bye.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, it's always cool when somebody comes on and brings really great points like that. And yeah, there's just a lot going on, and a lot of it doesn't seem to be favoring the working class. Liam O'Mara. If you don't know who Liam is, we did a live last night together. He's a history professor, PhD, super smart guy. Has a PhD in world history as well as a concentration in Middle East studies. So the guy knows his stuff, and of course he knows this Israel-Palestine issue like the back of his hand. But he knows everything about every country in the Middle East, the entire history going back, way back before Sykes-Picot. So he says the same thing. He says basically this is going to be a very difficult slog, and all these issues that are coming, the middle class, he says, is not even the middle class as we think it is. The middle class are people that are sort of independent, they can control themselves, and their lives are stable. They're not living paycheck. Most people are in the lower class in terms of the dynamics financially, and people have been drifting further and further lower. So, really, the system is so unfair, and egalitarianism is never going to be perfect, right? You go out into nature right now, and some people can run faster than the others, so there's always going to be that. But in our society, it's gotten so askew, so that the people at the top have so much of the wealth, and they've been accumulating more and more of it. I call them the sociopathic serial accumulator class, and it's because they only have one language, and it's called more, more. And they're not satisfied with a normal life like you and I. Okay, we got 2 guests left. I will let you know. The reason why I started a little early today, I normally do a 2-hour segment from noon to 2 p.m., and that's Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. But I started a little early today because I have to be somewhere at 2 p.m. for a physical therapy appointment. So I'm going to be leaving at around 1:40, 10 minutes or so. I'm going to try to keep my phone down in the car so we can keep talking. But sometimes, I don't know if it's the gyros. I've had lives interrupted because of being in my car. I try not to put it facing me so they can't see the movement, but we'll see. I don't want to look at my phone and be distracted is the point I'm making. So once I do that, we're not going to be able to bring guests up because I don't want to be distracted. So we have another guest who's been waiting named Kwali, and then we have Shafis Buru. That's going to be it for today. So if anybody else comes on, we'll do it tomorrow night. Hello? I think their speaker's on. Let's see if they come back on in a second. All right. Let's see if we can get Shafis Buru up here. You can come back up if you get back to your mic or whatever, get closer to your phone. All right, they're timing out also. So maybe if either of you, sometimes you got to turn your app off and come back in if it's not letting you connect. So give that a try. So yeah, there's some concerns. I mean, let's face it. Just to give you my schedule again, so you know if you want to come back on and watch more, if you like this stuff. By the way, for anybody who's on here for the first time, you're like, who the hell's this guy? My name is Chip Barnes. I'm a former Army officer. I was in the first Persian Gulf War back in 1990, and yes, that makes me old. You don't have to remind me. The gray hair does it too. But I also learned about the Israel-Palestine issue in my senior year of college, about a year before I went into the Army back in 1989. And I learned about this issue from a classmate who happened to give a presentation for our senior project on the first Intifada, which was a massive uprising of Palestinians in 1987. And I didn't know anything about the issue other than the basics that most Americans hear. Just like a lot of people are learning about it now, I just happened to be lucky enough to kind of get jarred out of my complacency back then. And it really shook me up because it was so different than what I'd learned. You know, I always thought that Israel was America's friend. It was a safe place for Jewish people. There was these bad people that wanted to harm them, you know, etc. And they were willing to do these really bad things, these T-word tactics, you know, cafes, buses, blah, blah, blah. You know, the belt, the self-inflicted belt that goes boom. And that's all I knew. And so, you know, I'm just living my life like everybody else as a young college kid. But that shook me up. So I felt so badly because I learned, oh, this is totally different. And these people are really marginalized, and that's not fair. And it just seemed really mean that the Israelis were doing all these things that weren't being reported, right? So I followed it over the years because it really interested me. And I don't know it as well as guys like Liam O'Mara. He knows more of the details, but I followed it pretty closely as much as I could. Read a bunch of books because that's all what we had back then. And then started looking at the internet when that came to be in the late 90s. And of course, in the 2000s, it all exploded. And now you can get every bit of information you want about the conflict. Let me share a couple of resources before, let me see if any of the guests came back here. Okay, they're not back up. So let me get back to my schedule, then I'll tell you some resources that are really good. You can use them as primers, or you know, you can give them to others who aren't as aware, which is a lot of times the case. So my schedule is Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's here on TikTok. I'm trying to add in Instagram if my router will take the extra data on the way out. But the last time I tried that, but I do have a second phone now that I'm going to try to use. I'm going to try to do that tomorrow night. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 8 p.m. Eastern time until 10 p.m. Eastern time. So that's the night crowd. And then a lot of people in the Middle East and in Asia were saying, hey man, I'm staying up until 4 in the morning to watch your lives. Can you please do one earlier? So every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, I go from 12 noon to 2 p.m. or so, like we're doing today. So now as far as resources go, this is really cool. So if you want a good historical context on how this all came to be, which a lot of people, even in Israel, still have no idea, which is crazy. A good one is by Israeli scholar Ilan Pappe, Pappe, and he does a lot of talks. He doesn't live in Israel anymore because he kind of got, you know, outcast because he was telling the truth. But he wrote a book called The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, which I think is fantastic. It's my favorite book. Sorry, Norman, I'm not trying to be mean to Norman. Norman has some really good books too, Norman Finkelstein. But there's another documentary you can watch if you want to know what goes on in the West Bank and how horrible the Israeli military makes life for Palestinians and all the rules and regs, just all the stuff, all that stuff that's just really bad. It's called Life in Occupied Palestine. Thank you, Em, for putting in my schedule. I appreciate that. And by the way, if you go to my main page where my videos are, the same information that Em just posted here on the live, there's a little picture photo that has my live schedule, so you can see it's pinned. So Life in Occupied Palestine is the documentary by a young Jewish woman named Anna Balter, Life in Occupied Palestine. It's about 45, 50 minutes. She went to Ramallah because a lot of people, she was brought up as in a Zionist household and was told all the same stories that I'd been told. And people were telling her it was different and she didn't believe them. So she traveled to Ramallah, one of the major cities inside of our town, I don't know what you call it, built up areas in the occupied territories. And she just learned a whole different set of stuff. She was like, just like I was shocked, she was shocked. And so she came back and made it her life mission to kind of talk about it because she's a good person. So Life in Occupied Palestine. Yeah, there have been some people that have streamed from there. Someone was asking about streaming from inside of Gaza or Palestine. Yeah, there's people that do that, although it's much harder in the West Bank. The Israelis are just because obviously they don't have soldiers everywhere in Gaza, so you can do stuff. There's soldiers everywhere. And if you get caught with even a phone that has Telegram on it to be able to communicate, you get bad things happen. Let's put it that way. And the Israelis are very, very, very involved in technology devices in the West Bank. They confiscate stuff all the time. They check it, they scour it. I mean, it's really bad. So anyway, yeah, life sucks for people who live in the occupied territories have it tough, right? Let's make it clear. So you can find out about that. And that doesn't include even everything that I've come to learn, but it's a lot of it. And then if you want to see what's happening in Gaza, there's a really good documentary that Abby Martin did. Abby is an independent journalist who does fantastic work. If you've never been to her YouTube page, it's called The Empire Files. And she's amazing. I mean, you could spend 6 months just going through her content. It's very, very interesting. It's very, very well done. Anyway, she created a documentary from Gaza called Gaza Fights for Freedom. So these are all great resources. If you know somebody who's talking and saying things that are inaccurate or not in keeping with what you've come to learn, or if you watch those things and then you learn about it and you hear somebody, the best thing you can do is just give it to them. Say, hey, I know you're an open-minded person. You're smart. You consider information to make your opinion up right. Here, check this out. You know, it was very valuable to me to take a look at this, whatever. So, and then you have a couple other things you can do. There's a really good documentary called Al-Nakba. Al-Nakba. It's a very good the cinematography, I don't know how to say the other part of it, is really good. It's like a 4-part series. It lasts about 3.5 hours. It's a very long one, but it tells you everything you need to know about what happened during the founding and leading up to the founding of Israel in terms of all the displacement and the different, unalivings that were going on. It was bad. And, people like to make it out like this, a land without a people for a people without a land, that whole sort of romantic story. No, it was a land with 750,000 people or so, maybe 720, whatever it is, that got kicked off. And many who didn't want to go got, kicked off the earth. So Nakba stands for catastrophe, for those of you who don't know. And that's why they call it Al-Nakba, is the documentary. And then finally, there's a really hard video to watch called Tantora. It's one of the towns that was involved in this dispossession and cleansing. And it's interviews with the Israelis who perpetrated some of the atrocities that went on and what they did when they were expelling people and etc. So it's called Tantora, Tantura, Tantora. And there's tons of other good stuff. Abby as well, if you go to Empire Files, she has a real quick overview called Palestine 101. So again, the other thing you can do, this is the other thing, go to my Twitter. If you go to my link tree in my bio, I've taken a lot of years to figure out who the right people are that I think are good independent journalists or presenters, content creators. And I have a list of them that you can go look at. And I've gotten tons of people saying, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, because it saves you a lot of time, right? You got to sift through a lot of stuff. There's just so much out there, right? So I have a list of like 35 to 40 really good people on there, and then a bunch of YouTube channels that have helped me. I'm always adding more as I find good ones. And there's a few I need to update it with, but go to my Twitter feed. It's pinned at the top, and it's just my name, Chip Barnes. But if you go to my link tree, which is a link in my bio where all my videos are, most people like me have one. Once you start building a following, you have to give people the information without having to say it again. So that's a shortcut to all the social media that I have. There's also some groups on there that you can join if you like the information I presented today, talking about the system being clogged up and voting having difficulty, all that stuff. There's a plan B that people are focused on and working on. It's been happening for a long time, but there's a lot of people waking up now, which is good. There's a group in which you can participate to learn more, to get involved. So I'll give you an example. There's a big protest in DC on January 13th at 1 p.m. in Washington, D.C. January 13th, 1 p.m., Washington, D.C. Huge pro-Palestine. It's going to be massive. I guarantee it's going to be huge. So that's an example of what. Plan B means an alternate path outside of the typical voting system to try to affect change, because voting has not been effective. And I call it the mud pit. And if you're going to pick a different uniform to go into a mud pit, one person's wearing a beige jumpsuit, the other person's wearing a white jumpsuit, Democrat, Republican. They both go into the mud pit. Who's going to be able to keep clean? You can call it quicksand. You can call it a mud pit. You're not going to be able to get out of it. It sucks people in, and the power structures that control elements of these processes make it very difficult for a good-minded person who wants to represent their constituents to do so. And that's been happening for decades. And I think if you don't see it by now, if you don't see that voting has not been successful in changing some of these big issues, you're just not paying close enough attention to it. We're taught in civics class, right? Do your civic duty and vote, right? But what difference is it really making? It may change. Listen, if you're a woman and you're worried about Roe v. Wade, I grant you that it can change issues like that. Supreme Court appointees, got it. I'm with you there. So it does matter to some extent, but to break the bigger power dynamics that shape the majority of larger issues, so to speak, the non-social issues, the big economic and foreign policy, militarism, empire, all that stuff. It's stuck. Let's face it. I mean, it's stuck between the national security establishment, which has been around for a long time. You know, JFK tried to do something that got tried to break it apart, and it didn't work, right? And they've gotten more powerful. And you got the law enforcement agencies, you got the military established, you got the defense contractors, you got all the industries, you got all the lobbying groups, you got all the big money donors, you got super PACs, you got dark money, you have Citizens United, you have corporate personhood. Money is speech. These are very difficult things to deal with. And voting, the system that they now control, can't be used to change those things. Think about it. How can you change something when the system that is owned by those people, you're trying to use that tool to change it? It makes no sense, right? Again, imagine you get rid of everybody in Congress tomorrow morning, brand new people, right? Put the uniforms on, they come into the mud pit, what happens? They get dirty. That's the power structure controlling those processes that I just outlined. So the point of the alternative plan B or other path or mass movement or whatever, and it may not even work, but it's a path that can be taken and attempted, just like a union tries to outlast a company to get their demands met by using the tools they have in terms of numbers and time and, you know, disrupting the companies. But imagine if the government was the company, all these power structures I'm laying out, and the union is the population. The union doesn't say, are you a Trumper? Hey, are you a Democrat? No, they say, hey, we're seeking these one or two objectives. Let's put aside our differences and just work on these two objectives. That is the idea behind a mass movement. It's decentralized. There's a series of escalatory strategies and processes that probably start very simply, like just having a dialogue, voting, whatever. And as things don't work, you step it up. That doesn't work, you step it up. So that's sort of laid out in sort of a map. And then there's a series of very succinct and specific demands: healthcare for all. Let's say get money out of politics, overturn Citizen United and other bullshit that's causing crony capitalism, and have more egalitarian tax structure, stop spending so much darn money overseas, whatever those things are, people agree on that. And then once you agree, you work towards it, right? That's the idea of Plan B, if you will. There are groups that I've established and others have established to try to facilitate people participating and getting more learned about it, understanding it. There needs to be mutual aid. Just like a union has a union fund, right, that provides a floor for people that if they're going to get involved, they have to find a way to survive while if you're going to stop working for 6 weeks, how are you going to pay your bills, right? Well, the mutual aid, right? Some people are more well-to-do. They have some savings they can work through. They don't need aid, but others may. So you have to create, so some people call it a strike fund. Some people call it mutual aid, whatever you call it. It's a safety net for people that otherwise wouldn't be able to be a part of it, right? That has to be community-based. Every community is different, right? Some people are lower income, some people are more well-to-do, some people don't give a shit about this. But the idea is, if voting isn't the path to change because it's stuck, what is going to be, right? And so you can sit back and just put your head in the sand, but then you get your ass kicked, right? Because your head's stuck in the sand. And you can watch Netflix and try not to worry about it and hope it gets better. But the only way it's going to get better is by action. And I don't know about you, but I've organized political campaigns before. I've worked on specific issues at the congressional level, as well as trying to work a presidential campaign. I wasn't running it, but I was a part of it. And it just didn't go anywhere. The power structure is that strong. They've done an amazing job. I mean, I got to tip my cap, right? They've kind of consolidated corporate power. All the money in society goes up through a corporate chain store structure to Wall Street. And that's it. Yeah, I got to get out the door. Somebody just mentioned that. I'm going to keep talking, just so you know, but I'm probably going to put my phone in the back pocket. So if anybody wants to come up and talk, please do. In fact, Sister Libre, I invited you here. Why don't you come up and talk for a second? I know you're somebody who does great videos. I'm going to try to invite you to come up because I'd love to hear you talk, because you make great videos. I think you do a good job. So here's somebody in the guest queue. All right, Sister Libre. There we go.
Hello, Chip.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm hanging in there.
Yeah, me too. I'm trying to think of what I have to talk about today. I guess one thing that's more related to stuff going on at home, a video that I posted about that just to raise awareness about, because I now deeply believe that colonial oppression is all tied together. So what we see in terms of like disproportionate violence against Black people in this country is directly tied to what happens in Gaza. So just for everyone who's on the call's awareness, I posted a video about my cousin who has a Black son, who's a D1 football player, I actually have the video that I posted, getting punched by police and bouncers at the in the town of the college he goes for. So, or I'm sorry, in the town of the college he goes to, which is Oxford, Ohio, Miami. So, I am thankfully that video has gotten a lot of attention. Actually, it doesn't look like it did because TikTok took the original one down, but there's still a second video I put up. So if people wouldn't mind checking out that video and doing the calls to action that I have requested, that'd be amazing. Because I do think that, again, it's all tied together. The oppression that happens here against Native Americans, against blacks and you know, other types of non-white people is tied to what's happening in Gaza. So that's one thing I'll mention.
Yeah,
Is
I
the
agree.
video deleted? No, the video is there. The video is there, you guys. It's on my pinned videos, but it's grayed out because it's graphic. It's video of my cousin's son, who's a 20-year-old football player. He's outside of a bar, and it's the video of these 5 bouncers, white bouncers, jumping him. One of them standing there and clapping. I'm on a call, sweetie. 1 second. One of the bouncers is clapping as they do this. Then while these bouncers have him restrained, the police officers, 2 police officers show up, and one of them just starts punching him while he's already face down and restrained in his head. It's disturbing to watch. Now, I will say that the police force has put this officer on paid leave. So, you know, you get a paid vacation when you do that kind of stuff here in the United States.
Yeah, nice, right?
Right. But anyway, that's the only non-Palestinian piece of content that I've really done in a long time. You know, like you, Chip, well, you're new to TikTok, and I love your story, Chip, about how you came to TikTok. And I've been on so many of your lives, but I love how so thank your therapist from all of us, because I know your therapist was kind of the one who's told you to come to this. And it's really great because it's brought together all of us, you know, and when a lot of us I know that I don't have any real friends in my life who care as much about what's going on. So when you do these lives, I can come here and feel like I'm around people who are like-minded, and it makes me feel sane. So thank you for doing it. Because, you know, that thing about my cousin's son was really the only non-Palestine video that I've made in a long time. It's really like consuming me completely. And every time I start to think like, okay, it's going to get better, I open up something and learn about something absolutely horrific. It's like you can't think it'll get worse, and it gets 10 times worse, you know? But yes, I have to put you guys on hold, but I have Mike. What's up, babe?
I'm going to let the other person come up for now.
Yeah, let the other person.
Palestinian engineers coming on. And I got to go to mute 1 second because I'm driving.
Hello. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good, good, good. I got on your live before, on your live before. So, I was thinking. So what happened in Gaza exposed to the world that there is no real democracy, especially in the U.S. Because when you have a democracy, you're supposed to choose who represents you, not who rules over you. In a democracy, nobody rules over you. You're ruling yourself. You're ruling over yourself, right? So the entire country is protesting for a ceasefire, and then Biden comes out saying like there is no chance of a ceasefire. So he's telling the people, this is not a democracy. I'm a dictator. I don't represent you. I represent the lobbies and the big companies. That's what he's saying to the people.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's a real problem in the United States where we have those who represent democracy, the people, majority are supposed to rule. But unfortunately, the elected and the political process has not served constituents for a long time. And, you know, arguably, you've heard this more power. It's considered by money this has been a period of day.
I don't know if people think the audio is patchy. I think you have a bad connection or something, Chip. You were breaking up.
Yeah, I mean, I took it might work better. Hopefully, it's working better now. But
Yeah.
has it gotten better? Can anybody hear me? Okay?
Yeah. Now
Can
it's
you hear me?
okay.
Okay? And want to make sure the audience
Yes.
can hear me. Okay? Oh, okay, good. Okay, well, yeah, and so this is not happening. In fact, this is the President Biden, uh, U.S. power structure for empire as well as the interest groups.
It's breaking up again, Chip.
Let me.
So, guys, in the comment, can you hear me clearly, or can you hear me
Yeah, because
clearly? Is
I
it,
just took
am
my.
I cutting off?
How about you? Can you hear me or no?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay. All right. Good. Yeah. I apologize, everybody. I had to drive to a meeting, so anyway. I have the phone down, like that's why the phone camera is blurring because I'm not going to look at it while I'm driving. I don't want to cause any problems. So please continue.
Okay, so what's happening in the US? We have these politicians and big companies benefiting from this war. This is a lab. Palestine is a lab, so they can test their weapons and sell tested weapons that were tested on people, on civilians.
Yes.
And those like weapons companies, they fund these politicians, and when the US gives weapons to Israel or to Ukraine or to anybody, they say it's aid, it's free, but it's not free. The American people are paying for it with their tax money. And what happens is those companies and those politicians get richer because of this, while the hardworking American people who are trying to survive are getting poorer. That's what this is doing for us. And and a lot of people have been trying to fight this by protesting, boycotting, calling their representatives, and all that is great. But I believe we need to escalate our efforts because, I mean, they don't like us protesting, but it doesn't bother them that much because the money is still flowing. So we need to do something to defund them so they can't do this to us. I mean, so far since 1946, the US have given Israel $340 billion. What can $340 billion do to the US economy? What can it do to the American people?
Yeah.
And
Good
and
points.
this is
It's fair to ask that.
yes, and this is just Israel. There are other countries that are getting aid from the US, many other countries. And and like just to make something clear for people, when the US says it's in our best interest to support Israel, it's in the politician's interest. It's not your interest as an American citizen, as a civilian. This support is costing you money while it's making Joe Biden richer. He's getting wealthier every day because of this support. But you, the hardworking people, are getting poorer. Same thing with Iraq. When they went there to steal the oil, you paid for the war, then they took the oil. You had no benefits from that oil. They got all the benefits from stealing the oil while you paid for the war. This is what happens. This is how the US functions.
Yeah, you're right. It's not even just the U.S. It's the global. It's sort of the Western multinational capital structure that doesn't really even have allegiance to a particular country. They're used as I've done videos about this. If you look through my video feed, you'll see how these people think. But they use the tools of sovereign nations to achieve their economic goals of increasing their return on capital. So, for example, they look at the U.S. Treasury as a place from which to direct funds that go through the companies in which they're large shareholders. And therefore, when the money gets churned through the allocation process, it doesn't go to Israel, it doesn't go to Ukraine, it goes to Boeing, it goes to McDonnell Douglas, it goes to Raytheon, it goes through Northrop Grumman. And the shareholders of these large weapon manufacturers and military contractors, they get the money and they get to sell things during these emergency processes at hugely inflated prices. And so we get the credit card bill, the interest on which is due every year, and that crowds out other domestic funding where they say, quote, we can't afford to provide X, Y, or Z because of all this interest on the debt. But we don't have any say in how the money gets appropriated because we can't get through this process that's locked up. So it's a game. George Carlin identified it, and he said, listen, you have no power. These people own you, which is true. It's a big club, and you and I aren't in it. Meaning, like the person who just said, they said that the government is used, the military is used as a tool to facilitate the aggregation of capital to the wealthy class.
Yeah, exactly.
Were you
So
able to hear? Yeah, that's what's going on.
hear you. The thing is, the people have the power as collectively, but not as individuals. And now, for the first time ever, we actually have the numbers to make a change. So we can actually now make a change because all the masks have fallen. Everything got exposed thanks to Gaza. Everything is exposed. And we can actually force change for the first time in history, like in modern history.
Potential, but yeah, potentially. If this sort of awakening moment, it could be like an Arab Spring type moment for the Western nations who are now seeing a window into the false nature of the system, where the Israeli propaganda and the U.S. propaganda is not congruent with what people are seeing on their own apps on social media. I did a video about this in the first weekend of the war, and I said, do you believe the media or do you believe your own two eyes? And that's been the big difference. People visually seeing the suffering and the death and the carnage, and it's at a scale that's incomprehensible to the average person. So it has emotionally jarred them out of their complacency and out of the bubble they've been living in based on the propaganda system. So now they're questioning everything, which is a good thing. Then that awakening and that awareness has to be leveraged into some type of action. Awareness alone won't get anything done.
So, I've been consulting with a lot of people from different backgrounds, like with economists, bankers, and a lot of people, and about how can we enforce a change as quick as possible. And we came up with ideas that can actually change things quickly, faster than, I mean, there is a
What
long-term
what are some of
plan, but
what are some of those ideas? Can you be specific and rather quick about it?
yeah. Okay, so like the first thing, if you live in the US, changing your voter registration and listing a reason that you're not interested in funding a war and genocide and funding foreign countries. If enough people did that, that could scare the main parties. If you change your registration from Democrat or Republican to an independent and list these reasons. So if enough
What else?
people do that, that could be scary. So this is the main. This is the first point. The second point: if 10% of the people close their bank accounts, we can drive the economy into a halt. But I don't think 10% of the people would do it. So what we think we can do is a part of us can open accounts in credit unions and then transfer all our money to the credit union and set up all the auto payments and the direct debits and all that into a credit union account. Then sending a letter to the bank telling them that I'm going to close my bank account because I'm not okay with how the United States is using our money by funding wars and funding foreign entities, so I'm closing my bank account. So if a lot of people did that, we can actually defund the government. Because when you have your money in a bank account, the money is in reality goes to the central bank, so it's within reach of the government. It's within reach of the government. Whenever they need funds, they can just take it from the central bank and they put it back later. So if 10% of the accounts are closed, you can defund the government, and they will not let it reach that point. So if actually 10% of the people send letters that they are going to close their bank accounts, while 1% of the people did close their bank accounts, that will scare them right away, and they would have no choice but to listen to us because they don't want the economy to crash. Because if the economy crashed, they are over. So we don't need Joe Biden. We can live with or without Joe Biden, but he needs us to be president. We don't need Jeff Bezos. We can live with or without Amazon, but he needs us to be a billionaire. So we, the working people, we don't need the 1%. The 1% needs us so they can be wealthy and rich and powerful, but we don't need them.
Yeah, I'm going to
So
jump in and just say, okay, let me address the first 2 points that you raised. And again, I'm not for stopping anybody from doing anything. Let me give you an example outside a different issue. So we know we have ecological problems related to industrialization, and we're going to have to face them at some point and figure out a way to make all this work. I would liken those tactics, which aren't bad, by the way. Those are tactics within a broader strategy to affect the ruling class and hopefully convince people. I don't think the problems, though, and this is where I'm going to make my argument. I don't want to negate yours, but I want to make a different one. I don't think the problem is at the political party level because the ruling class is relatively indifferent to which party's in power. And the reason they don't care is because they have both of them sewn up into a nice little bow. What the elections do is affect the potential to affect certain social issues, and they determine who gets to demand most of the bribes throughout the time they're going to be in Congress to get more money for the things people want to get done, unfortunately. What the power structure in terms of the permanent establishment within the security state and the moneyed class and the corporate influence doesn't change based on what you just described. Will it be a bit of a pain in the ass? Will the banks have to go to the Federal Reserve window and draw some more money to beef up their reserves? Yes, because they're supposed to maintain, but they'll just do that. The Fed will just put more money on their balance sheet. In terms of writing letters to the bank threatening to close the accounts, banks won't give a shit. Trust me, they will not give a shit because they can get money at will from the government because they control the government. So the problem isn't the governing apparatus. The problem are the mechanisms that control and manage the governing apparatus. That's the power structure that has to be broken, and it's a much more difficult path to break. That's why I've said repeatedly that I believe, and not listen, every tactic along the way is fine. Voting is fine, recycling is fine. You know, taking your food scraps and putting them in the woods, which I do, is great. But the greater problem is the massive impact that fossil fuel driven, communications and tech driven, massive human industrial civilization with a massively growing population has huge demands for energy and material inputs that won't be slowed by the smaller peripheral issues, nor will the power structure that exists that controls the political process and everything else in our world be broken by token issues on the periphery. Voting, banking issues, boycotts. The only thing that will stop is to bring enough of them to bear simultaneously with a large enough portion that creates scale that in aggregate will stop the system from functioning as is. That will be scary to them because that eliminates the profitability. But what has to happen for that to happen is that you have to have three tools in use: people's labor, people's sheer numbers, and people's purchasing power. Those are the three big ones we have. Those are the three legs of our stool. They all have to be brought to bear. They all have to be brought to bear at large scale, and it has to be done via a decentralized movement that clogs every artery of commerce and it locks the entire system up. That's bigger than the politicians. That's the entire system. And until you affect it at the systemic level, you're not going to have enough influence that will overcome the existing power dynamics. I guarantee you. Which is sobering, right? That's hard to take in. But that's the reality we find ourselves in. And I'm about to go into my appointment, so I'm going to have to end the live with that. Thank you for calling. That's very good points you brought up, though. None of it's bad. Again, somebody was arguing that unionization is the answer because then that same pressure can be applied to corporations and also to government. I disagree. First of all, they're going to try to break the backs of any unionizing efforts. It's very difficult to do. Takes a lot of time, and it's one company or one sector at a time. There's tons and tons and tons of industries that have to be overcome. Stopping the gears of commerce affects everyone at the same time. Blocking the ports, blocking the roads, blocking the bridges, blocking the highways, blocking the railways, blocking the airports, everything stops, right? You don't give your labor to the companies, no workers. You don't buy anything other than essentials, no consumption. Now, do you think if that happens all at once at like 30 or 40 million Americans, that's going to make a difference? I think so. That will get their attention. Anything short of that is going to be a nuisance, like a fly at a party. They're going to smack it down or rush it away with their hands and keep spending money. So unfortunately, that's the mission, which is probably going to be difficult to do under the best of circumstances and probably unlikely to happen, unfortunately, because people are people, right? And they're going to be unlikely to participate. They're unlikely to even know what's going on at this point, right? They're subject to the propaganda system. I got to run. Thanks for listening. I'm on again. I'm on Monday, Wednesday, Friday on TikTok from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. So that means tomorrow night at 8 p.m. We'll be back on here Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. Thank you to the moderators who helped out, which is Maz and M, and any others who are doing it. Thank you so much. Thanks for the guests who spoke. Thanks for those who have participated as far as listening and following. I appreciate every one of you. And if you go to my video library, I talk about almost all of these subjects. You can just scroll through. It goes back to the beginning of the conflict a couple months ago. So thank you so much, folks. I really appreciate it. I'll see you next time. Okay. Have a great day.